been in trouble.
It is interesting to see that in Benjamin Netanyahu's speech, he name-checked a man called Steve Witkoff. Now, he is the special presidential envoy for peace and had been had a huge part to play in this 20-point peace plan, sort of conjured up by the Americans, agreed to by both Israel and Hamas. But there's an interesting domestic angle to Steve Witkoff, because in the early hours of this morning, Steve Witkoff sent out a tweet in which he said he'd like to acknowledge, this was completely out of the blue, I would like to acknowledge the vital role of the United Kingdom in assisting and coordinating efforts that have led us to this historic day in Israel. In particular, I want to recognise the incredible input of National Security Advisor Jonathan Powell. Now,
is that under pressure?
That great. I mean, huge questions in terms of who tried to get this tweet out there. Why was this behind-the-scenes man named impromptu by Steve Witkoff?
Well, Tom, you know the answer, don't you? As does Mark and Nana. I mean, this guy's in trouble, under fire, over the issue of China and the way the UK will look at this now.
We should say that Donald Trump is just being introduced there. Let's listen in to the Israeli Knesset.
To address the Knesset. Thank you very much, everybody. It's a great honor. Nice place. Very nice place. Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, esteemed members of the Knesset and cherished citizens of Israel, we gather on a day of profound joy, of soaring hope, of renewed faith, and above all, a day to give our deepest thanks to the Almighty God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. After 2 harrowing years in darkness and captivity, 20 courageous hostages are returning to the glorious embrace of their families, and it is glorious. 28 more precious loved ones are coming home at last to rest in this sacred soil for all of time. And after so many years of unceasing war and endless danger, today the skies are calm, the guns are silent, the sirens are still, and the sun rises on a holy land that is finally at peace, a land and a region that will live, God willing, in peace for all eternity. This is not only the end of a war, this is the end of an age of terror and death, and the beginning of the age of faith and hope and of God. It's the start of a grand concord and lasting harmony for Israel and all the nations of what will soon be a truly magnificent region. I believe that so strongly. This is the historic dawn of a new Middle East. I want to express my gratitude to a man of exceptional courage and patriotism, whose partnership did so much to make this momentous day possible. You know who I'm talking about. There's only one, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Bibi, please stand up. And he is not easy, I want to tell you. He's not the easiest guy to deal with, but that's what makes him great. That's what makes him great. Thank you very much, baby. Great job. Let me also convey my tremendous appreciation for all of the nations of the Arab and Muslim world that came together to press Hamas to set the hostages free and to send them home. We had a lot of help. We had a lot of help from a lot of people that you wouldn't suspect, and I want to thank them very much for that. It's an incredible triumph for Israel and the world to have all of these nations working together as partners in peace. And it's pretty unusual for you to see that, but it happened in this case. This was a very unusual point in time, a brilliant point in time. Generations from now, this will be remembered as the moment that everything began to change, and change very much for the better. Like the USA right now, it will be the golden age of Israel and the golden age of the Middle East. It's going to work together. I'd like to thank several great American patriots for their invaluable help in getting something done that almost everyone thought was absolutely impossible. We were wasting our time. So many people said, "You're just wasting your time." But we weren't, because we had talented people working with us, and we had people that loved your country, and frankly, people that loved the region. They loved the Middle East. I want to thank my friend Steve Witkoff. You know, Steve was chosen by me. He never did this before, but I knew him as a few things. He was a great businessman, but I know a lot of great businessmen, to be honest with you. He had tremendous negotiating skills, but I know a lot of people that negotiate pretty well, although it is an art. But there are people that can negotiate pretty well. But most importantly with Steve, he's just a great guy. Everybody loved him. Everybody. I mean, I know some negotiators that are so good, but you wouldn't have had peace in the Middle East. It would be in World War III right now with some of these guys. Everybody loves Steve, and they respect him, and they somehow can relate to him. I've known him for many years, and I've seen it over and over again.
להוציא את חבר הכנסת עודה, להוציא אותו מהאולם, להוציא אותו מיד, החוצה, החוצה, החוצה. להוציא גם את חבר הכנסת כסיף, להוציא את חבר הכנסת כסיף מהאולם, להוציא אותו מיד.
Huge disturbance in the Knesset right now. Breaking news. It looks like a protester charged towards the US president. That protester has been bundled out of the Knesset as we speak. Donald Trump standing firm, staying at the podium. Let's listen in.
That was very efficient. So back to Steve. He's But I tell one story because he was so involved, and then we called in Jared. We need that brain on occasion. We got to get Jared in here. We got to get a certain group of people, but Steve started this all by himself. I call him Henry Kissinger, who doesn't leak, okay? Henry is a big leaker. He leaked. Steve doesn't leak. Steve just wants to get the job done. He wants to do what's right. But I'll give you just a quick story because, as you know, he's working on the war with Russia and Ukraine, a war that would have never happened if I were president. A shame. 7,000 young soldiers a week are being killed. More than that this last week. It's a shame. It should have never happened. But it did happen, and we won the race, and I took over this horrible war that's been raging, and I thought it would be easily settled. I thought it was a hell of a lot easier than doing what we just did very successfully with Israel and a lot of other people. But this came first, and we'll get that one. But I set up a meeting for him to meet with President Putin, thinking it would be a 15 or a 20-minute meeting. Steve had no idea about Russia, had no idea about Putin too much, didn't know too much about politics, wasn't that interested. He was really good at real estate, but he had that quality that I was looking for, and I didn't see it around in too many ways. And I set up the meeting with Putin, and I called. I said, is Steve finished yet? That was about a half an hour into the meeting. No, sir, he's not. He's still inside. This is in Moscow. I said, well, how's he doing? I don't know, sir. He's still inside. I called up an hour later. Let me speak to Steve. Sir, he's still with Putin. He's with President Putin. I said, wow, it's a long meeting, 1 hour. I called up an hour later, he was still with Putin. 3 hours later, he was still with Putin. 4 hours later, he started to get the word that he was going to be coming out soon. And in 5 hours, he came out. I said, what the hell were you talking about for 5 hours? And he says, just a lot of interesting things. We're talking about a lot of interesting things, including what he went in there for, but you can't talk about it for 5. You can talk about it for a certain period of time, and you know what you're getting. But that's a talent. That's a talent, where you can do that. Most people I'd send in, number one, they wouldn't be accepted. Number two, if they were, the meeting would last 5 minutes, and that's what happens with Steve. Everybody loves him. They love him on this side. They love him on the other side. And he really is. He's a great negotiator because he's a great guy. So thank you very much, Steve, very much. And let me also give a very special thanks to someone who truly loves Israel. In fact, loves it so much that my daughter converted. My daughter converted. I didn't know this was going to happen. And Ivanka's here. And Bibi, you do know this was not in the cards for me. You understand that. And she is so happy, and they are so happy. At least I think they're happy. If they're not, we have a big story, right? No, they have a great marriage, and they get along great. They're best friends. They have a very special relationship. But Jared has been so helpful. He really did something very special. He established the Abraham Accords with a group of very wonderful people. I like calling it the Avraham Accords, because people that, right? Avraham. It's so cool. It's so much sort of nicer, you know, the Abraham versus the Avraham. I just don't want to sound too sanctimonious when I do it, so, you know, I sort of split it up. This way we keep everybody happy. But we have some very great talent, and they have no excuses for anything that's taken place, because we had some unbelievably good people working on this. And then you're going to add a man named Marco Rubio, who is also here. And I have a prediction that Marco will go down, I mean this, as the greatest Secretary of State in the history of the United States. I believe that. I believe it. And he and I, you know, we really fought it out. You remember, he was tough. He was nasty. Who the hell thought this was going to happen, Marco, right? And now I'm saying he's going to go down as the greatest. He will. He was always smart and sharp, and people respect him. And then we have somebody who's young, but an unbelievable leader. I saw it a long time ago, and he's turned out to be even better than we thought. Right, Susie? I think even better. And that's Pete Hegseth, who is our Secretary of War, formerly Secretary of Defense. And as you know, we decisively won World War I. We decisively won World War II decisively. And everything in between and everything before it, we won everything. And then they had the brilliant idea of changing the name from war, you know, it was war, to defense. And with that went a certain thinking. And we fought in a very politically correct way after that. We always had the strongest military, and now we have a stronger military than we've ever had before. Because of my first term, I've totally rebuilt the military, every aspect of it. But we have, if you think, we settled 8 wars in 8 months. I'm now including this one, by the way, if that's okay. They may say, well, that was quick, because yesterday I was saying 7, but now I can say 8. The hostages are back. The hostages are back. It is a good feeling. Isn't that nice to say? You know, I just said the hostage. First time I said the hostages are back. It feels so good to say it. But when you settle 8 wars in 8 months, that means you don't like war. Everyone thought I was going to be brutal. In fact, I remember Hillary Clinton during a debate, she said, look at him, he's going to go to war with everybody. And actually, she said, he's got a personality that's all about war. No, and my personality actually is all about stopping wars, and it seems to work. It seems to work. But it also means this name change and our attitude that we're not going to go into a war, but if we do, we're going to win that war like nobody has ever won a war before. We will not be politically correct, but we're not going to be there. And I think, you know, as you mentioned, Bibi, before, peace through strength, and that's what it's all about. The United States has the greatest and most powerful military in the, right now, history of the world. I can tell you we have weapons that nobody's ever dreamt of. I only hope we never have to use them. I rebuilt the military. I was proud to do it, but some of the things I hated to do, I hated certain commitments because the level of power is so enormous, it's so dangerous, so bad. But we have to do what we have to do. We make the best weapons in the world, and we've got a lot of them. And we've given a lot to Israel, frankly. And I mean, Bibi would call me so many times, can you get me this weapon, that weapon, that weapon? Some of them I never heard of, Bibi, and I made them. But we'd get them here, wouldn't we? And they are the best. They are the best. But you used them well. It also takes people that know how to use them. And you obviously used them very well. But so many that Israel became strong and powerful, which ultimately led to peace. That's what led to peace. So as we celebrate today, let us remember how this nightmare of depravity and death all began. 2 years ago, on the eve of the Simchat Torah holiday, thousands of innocent Israeli civilians were attacked by terrorists, and one of the most evil and heinous desecrations of innocent life the world has ever seen, the worst slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. The cruelty of October 7th struck to the core of humanity itself. Nobody could believe what they were witnessing. The United States of America grieved alongside you, and we mourned for our own citizens who were so viciously taken that day. And to all the families whose lives were forever changed by the atrocities of that day, and all of the people of Israel, please know that America joins you in those two everlasting vows: never forget and never again. From October 7th until this week, Israel has been a nation at war, enduring burdens that only a proud and faithful people could withstand. It was a very tough period of time. For so many families across this land, it has been years since you've known a single day of true peace. But now at last, not only for Israelis, but also for Palestinians and for many others, the long and painful nightmare is finally over. And as the dust settles, the smoke fades, the debris is removed, and the ashes cleaned from the air, the day that breaks on a region transformed, and a beautiful and much brighter future appears suddenly within your reach. This is now a very exciting time for Israel and for the entire Middle East, because all across the Middle East, the forces of chaos, terror, and ruin that have plagued the region for decades now stand weakened, isolated, and totally defeated. A new coalition of proud and responsible nations is emerging, and because of us, the enemies of all civilization are in retreat. Thanks to the bravery and incredible skill of the Israeli Defense Forces and Operation Rising Lion, guy's central casting. Let's put him in a movie. Look at him. Great job. And my people loved working with you. Loved it. They worked so well together. But many of Iran's top terrorists, including nuclear scientists and commanders, have been extinguished from this earth. And with Operation Midnight Hammer, boy, that's a great name for that, what we did last June. The United States military flew 7 of those beautiful B-2 bombers. They look so beautiful all of a sudden. They were always, I thought they were pretty planes. I had no idea they could do what they did. In fact, we just ordered 28 more of them. A little updated version. We ordered a whole pile of them. And almost 100 other planes went with them, including fighter jets. And we had 52 tankers, big, beautiful, brand new tankers that were loading them up 4 or 5 times. They've traveled 37 hours back and forth. Think of that. But we had tankers all over the sky for all the other planes. We had the F-22s, the F-35s, F-16s. We had a hell of a lot of planes. So we had 52 gas stations in the sky. That's what they call them. I'll tell you, I wouldn't want to be flying one of them. We have our great General Raisin Cain right here. General, stand up. This guy, what a general. Thank you. I asked General Cain, I said, you know, we're having problems with ISIS, and I was in Washington, and I asked, how long would it take to defeat ISIS? And my Washington generals told me, 3, 4, maybe 5 years, sir. I said, I don't get it. We got the best equipment in the world. Why? So I flew to Iraq, and I met with a man named Cain. I said, what's your first name? He said, they call me Raisin, sir. I said, wait a minute, your name is Raisin Cain? I've been looking for you for a long time. You gotta be kidding. So they told me 3, 4, 5 years to defeat ISIS. And I sit down with him and I say, why is it? I flew there in the dark of night. I landed, I'll never forget it. It was quite a trip. I'm glad I made it because I met him. I said, could I ask you, General? I come down. He said with another general and a sergeant. Everybody was like central casting. They could go into a movie right now. Between him and you guys over here, we could get rich making movies, okay? And they got along so great. That's the beautiful thing, that your military and our military, Bibi, got along so great. But I was told by the television generals in Washington, we have the best equipment in the world. Why is it taking so long? And they said, 4 years. I said, so let me ask you, Raisin, how long would it take you to defeat ISIS? Sir, we can do it in 3 weeks, but you'll probably have some time left over. I said, you gotta be kidding. What the hell are you talking about? They said 4 years. I said, well, sir, look, it's not my place to say, but you're asking me the question. What you have to do is you hit him from the west, you hit him from the north, you hit him from the south, you hit him above, you hit him below. I said, so why didn't they do it? And he didn't want to speak badly of his superiors, which is hard to believe they were his superiors. It should have been the other way around a long time ago, because he's the one that did Operation Hammer. It was flawless. It was flawless. It was absolutely flawless. And I said, so you really think you can do it in 4 weeks? Yes, sir, 100%. You have to do it differently than they were doing it. They were using one base, and it was hundreds of miles away. And he says, we have all these portable bases all over the Middle East. And they didn't want to use them because they didn't want to offend the country where the portable, they wouldn't have even known what the hell the planes were going up, right? They wouldn't have known, but he said, no, they didn't want to defend anybody, offend anybody, but we can do it in 4 weeks. I said, you sure about that? I'm going to call you back. I'll call you back on Monday. I'm going back to Washington. But you think 4 weeks? Yes, sir, I think we can do it in 4 weeks. We'll have time left over. So I call him on Monday. I say, you think you can do it? 4 weeks. I said, go ahead and do it. He did it. I'll tell you, he did it in 4 weeks, less than 4 weeks. So, General, stand up, please. Again, this is a real general. This is not a television general. He doesn't want to go on television. He doesn't want to go on television. I said the other guys love being on television. So we dropped 14 bombs on Iran's key nuclear facilities, totally, as I said originally, obliterating them. And that's been confirmed, and everybody understands it. Together we stopped the #1 state sponsor of terror from obtaining the world's most dangerous weapons. And if you think about it, if we didn't do that, and assuming we made the same deal that we have today, there'd be a dark cloud over this deal. And #1, it wouldn't happen because the other Arab and Muslim nations really wouldn't feel comfortable making the deal that we have now, right? If Iran had that nuclear weapon that they were about 2 months away from having. They would have had it in 2 months or maybe less than that. They were right at, this was our last shot. They looked at it for 22 years. This was our last shot. The pilots told me that. They said, 22 years, sir, they looked at it. Our predecessors looked, they studied it. 3 times a year would do drills on that exact attack. And boy, did they get it right. But let's assume they didn't, and let's assume there was large-scale nuclear weapons in the hands of Iran. We couldn't be here today. Even if we signed the deal, which we couldn't do because a lot of people would not want to have anything to do with it, we took a big cloud off of the Middle East and off of Israel. And it was my honor to help. But isn't it true, though, that can you imagine the same, let's assume, Bibi, the same documents, we had everything the same, but you had somebody out there that was, in the opinion of everybody, all-powerful in the Middle East. They took a big hit, didn't they? Didn't they take a big hit? Boy, oh boy. They got hit from one side, from the other. And you know, it would be great if we could make a peace deal with them. And I think that's big. Would you be happy with that? Wouldn't it be nice, I think? Because I think they want to. I think they're tired. Somebody said, sir, they're starting their nuclear program again. I said, let me tell you something. They're not starting anything. They want to survive. The last thing they want to do is start digging holes again in mountains that just got blown up and start. They're not doing this. They want to survive, okay? But I think we have a chance. Steve, you, and I think Jared, come on, I'll call you back for another one. We always bring Jared when we want to get that deal closed. We bring Jared, but Steve, you and Jared and the General and Pete and Marco, you'll get that deal done easy. I think that'll be easy. But first we have to get Russia done. We got to get that one done. If you don't mind, Steve, let's focus on Russia first, all right? We'll get it done. In Lebanon, the dagger of Hezbollah, long aimed at Israel's throat, has been totally shattered. My administration is actively supporting the new president of Lebanon in his mission to permanently disarm Hezbollah's terror brigades. He's doing very well. And build a thriving state at peace with its neighbors. And you're very much in favor of that, I know. And good things are happening there, really good things. And with this week's ceasefire, we've achieved the most challenging breakthrough of them all. The most challenging breakthrough maybe ever. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. I've been involved in a lot of success. I have never seen anything like what's going on today all over the world. People are dancing in the streets, not just in Israel. They're dancing in the streets of countries that would have never danced in the street about what's happening today. They're dancing in those streets. So this long and difficult war has now ended. You know, some people say 3,000 years, some people say 500 years, whatever it is. It's the granddaddy of them all. And in an unprecedented achievement, virtually the entire region has endorsed the plan that Gaza will be immediately demilitarized, that Hamas will be disarmed, and Israel's security will no longer be threatened in any way, shape, or form. So Israel, with our help, has won all that they can by force of arms. You've won. I mean, you've won. Now it's time to translate these victories against terrorists on the battlefield into the ultimate prize of peace and prosperity for the entire Middle East. It's about time you were able to enjoy the fruits of your labor. Mr. Opposition Leader. I said he's a very nice opposition leader. I think... No, he's a nice man. Bibi, he's a nice man. He knows what he's doing, right? No, he's a very nice guy. Well, see, now you can be a little bit nicer, Bibi, because you're not at war anymore, Bibi. by embracing the opportunities of this moment can we achieve our goal of ensuring that the horrors of recent years will never happen again. You don't want to have to go through this again. 8 years ago, I came to this region on a very special first trip abroad as the President of the United States. I came here very early at your request. I addressed the leaders of the Arab and Muslim world gathered in Saudi Arabia and said that it was time to build a future free of the grip of extremism and terror. And interestingly, right now, as soon as I'm finished, I'm quite late. You've kept me quite late between opposition leaders and Bibi's brilliant but very long speech. I thought I was going to run up here, make a speech, and then head to Egypt. It didn't work out, though. And you made a pretty long one, too, sir. But I liked what you all said. It could be worse. Supposing on top of it, I didn't like what you said. That would be no good, Ron, would it? Ron, you did a great job, by the way, Ron. So I'm going to be meeting, actually, in a little while, I'm going to be meeting with the most powerful, the richest nations, really, in the world, although now, with the tariffs, the United States is by far the richest nation in the world, as you probably have been reading. But the richest nations, most powerful nations, you know, tremendous, headed by some tremendous people in many cases. Some cases I wouldn't say necessarily I would endorse. But I will tell you, some incredible people that really helped us make this all possible. So I'll be going there. I'll be quite late. They might not be there by the time I get there. But we're going to give it a shot. But the journey we started back then led to the crushing defeat of the ISIS caliphate, to the monumental Abraham Accords, and ultimately to the historic ceasefire this week, in which many of those same nations really played a very pivotal role, I have to tell you. Steve will tell you that. Jared will tell you that. Together, we've shown that peace is not just a hope that we can dream about. It's a reality we can build upon day by day, person by person, and nation by nation. And because of that, the Middle East is finally ready to embrace its extraordinary potential. You have extraordinary potential in this region. It should now be clear to everyone throughout the region that decades of fomenting terrorism and extremism, jihadism and anti-Semitism have not worked. They haven't worked. They've been a disaster. They've just killed. They've killed. They've backfired completely and totally. They've just totally backfired. Everything that you thought, take it worst case, it's turned out to be worse than that. They have not worked. From Gaza to Iran, those bitter hatreds have delivered nothing but misery, suffering, failure, and death. They've served not to weaken Israel, but to annihilate the very forces that did the most to foment this hatred. And it's really, I mean, everybody that's tried it has become irrelevant. Meanwhile, we've seen those nations that set aside their differences, reached across ancient divides, and pursued engagement are now among the most successful in the region. They're getting along with Israel, and they're doing great. And I can tell you the 4 nations that joined the Abraham Accords early on, and you'd all be doing me a favor, and I'm going to be saying this in a little while to some other friends, would love you all to, is this right, Jared? Join up in the Abraham Accords. We have to join up and get together. You can have that whole thing filled out. We had a very weak administration, worst president in the history of our country by far. And Barack Obama was not far behind, by the way. And they did nothing with this incredible document, the Abraham Accords, but now you can fill them up. Now you have peace, you have people that really like Israel. I'll tell you what, and they like Israel a lot more today than they did even 5 weeks ago. You've made a lot of, you've come back. You've come back strong because it was getting to be a little nasty out there in the world, and ultimately the world wins. You can't beat the world. Oh, I would say to Bibi, it's now time, and he understood it better than anybody, because ultimately, you know, the world's a very big place. And I've said a lot. I said, this piece of land is very small. It's unbelievable what you've done with that tiny, you look at a map even of just, not the world, the Middle East, and you have this little dot. And think of what you've done. It's incredible. It's incredible. But the world is loving Israel again. And I said to Bibi, you know, the world is big and it's strong. And Ron, ultimately, the world wins. And we don't have to worry about that now. But there was getting to be a period of time over the last few months, you know, the world wanted peace and Israel wanted peace. Everybody did. Everybody did. And what a victory it's been, right? What a victory it's been. If you would have gone on for 3, 4 more years, keep fighting, it was getting bad. It was getting heated. The timing of this is brilliant. And I said, Bibi, you're going to be remembered for this far more than if you kept this thing going, kill. It would be it would not be the same. And I just want to congratulate you for having the courage to say, that's it, we've won, and now let's enjoy our lives and let's rebuild Israel and make it stronger and bigger and better than it's ever been before. We're going to do that. Took a lot of guts. And the choice for Palestinians could not be more clear. This is their chance to turn forever from the path of terror and violence. It's been extreme, to exile the wicked forces of hate that are in their midst, and I think that's going to happen. I've met some people over the last couple of months that want to see it happen very much, and after tremendous pain and death and hardship, now is the time to concentrate on building their people up instead of trying to tear Israel down. We don't want that to happen again. And the total focus of Gazans must be on restoring the fundamentals of stability, safety, dignity, and economic development so they can finally have the better life that their children really do deserve after all these decades of horror. I intend to be a partner in this effort in the sense that we're going to help and we're going to do something that became unbelievably popular. Everybody wants to be on it. It's called the Board of Peace, okay? How about that? Is that a beautiful name? Like a board of peace. The only bad thing from my standpoint, every single nation involved has asked me to be the chair, and I'll tell you, I'm very busy. I didn't count on that, but you know what? If we do it, we'll do it right, and we have unbelievable power and wealth, because you're going to need wealth. You're going to need wealth to rebuild things, and they have wealth like few people have wealth. I want to thank the Arab and Muslim nations for their commitment that they've made to support a safe rebuilding of Gaza and beyond. I have many Arab countries, very wealthy countries, that came up and said, we'll put up tremendous amounts of money to get to rebuild Gaza, and I think that's going to happen. The power, they want dignity, they want to come forward, and they want to say, and I want to say who they are, because what they're doing is going to be, I think, something that you're going to be very impressed with, Bibi, and you need that. You need the kind of economic power that they have, and they want to see it work, and they want to see it be safe, and they want to see it be good for Israel, too. And as much money as it will be, and it's a lot, as you can see, it's a lot. For these countries, it's relatively little relative to their worth It's really a lot of money like most people could never even conceive, but for these countries, it's not that much, especially because it ensures success and stability in the Middle East, which is what they want to see. So many of them will be with us in Egypt in a little while, I think. I'm not sure. They may be gone. They may have taken their Boeing 747s and left. I said, what kind of a plane do you fly? 747. I said, that's a large plane. No, they may have. Steve, do you think they've left on their their brand new Boeing 747s? Or, I don't know. We're going to find out soon. It's going to be a big story. There'll be 2 people left, and they'll be the 2 poorest ones. But it will be the wealthiest and most powerful group of nations. So the group that we have assembled, that's waiting for us, is the wealthiest and most powerful group ever assembled at one time. There has never been a group like this. And they're only looking for good. They want good. They're going to do good. And as those commitments are made, I'm going to let the world know who's doing it, because they really deserve to get the credit. And some of them probably won't want the credit, but they deserve it. It's more obvious than ever that the productive and responsible nations of this region should not be enemies or adversaries. You should be partners and eventually even friends, and that's what's going to happen. I know it. Together you can stand against the forces of chaos. Yeah, you go ahead. That's an important point. Because you can stand against the forces of chaos that threatened all of your interests, and it's always a big threat, and unleash incredible prosperity and opportunity for all the people of these lands, and that's what's going to happen. You're going to unleash numbers and success, the likes of which Israel has never been able to think of, because you're so firm, and you should be, and you've done the right thing in defending yourself. You're not going to have to worry so much about it. You've won, and now you can build, and you can do things that you never even thought possible. When you put that genius into doing something else, it's going to be something it's going to be a miracle. The miracle in the desert, it's going to be amazing. And it already is in a true sense. But it'll be wonderful when you can spend time thinking about other than war and defense and offense also. To that end, it's my firm hope and dream, frankly, that together the Abraham Accords will turn out to be everything that we thought they would. Those 4 countries were very, very brave in doing it. They did it at a very early point, and every single one of them benefits unbelievably financially. And if you noticed, even in this bad period that we just went through, they all remained a member of the Abraham Accords. They've done unbelievably well. And you know who you are, and I want to thank you. And they've stayed because of loyalty, but they've also stayed because it was really good business. They've made a lot of money being members, and you're going to all, I hope that every one of the countries that we're seeking, Jared, I hope they join quickly. No games, no nothing. Just join, get it. It's going to be a great peacemaker. It's really going to bring it together beyond anybody's wildest dreams. So instead of building fortresses to keep enemies at bay, the nations of this region should be building infrastructure to weave your commerce closer together, because you've got to compete with the big world out there in commerce now. It's a different kind of competition. Instead of making weapons and missiles, the wealth of this region should flow to schools and medicine, industry, and frankly, the new hot thing, artificial intelligence. It's a lot of intelligence you're going to have to be thrown off to pay back these sums of money that they're doing. But that's really the hot one. And I might say that the United States, a year ago, was a dead country. I say it to people. I heard it first from the King of Saudi Arabia. I then heard it from UAE. I heard it from Qatar. I heard it from many other countries. A year ago, the United States of America was a dead country. Now it's the hottest country anywhere in the world. It is the hottest. There's no question about it. In fact, if you go back a year ago, before the election, although once we had November 5th, we became hot because people got it. I would say November 5th was a time that we became really hot. But once you go back a couple of years, if I were in charge and the country was doing what they were, nobody was going to ask me to speak. Nobody asked Joe Biden to come up and speak, I guarantee you that. And if they did, he would have turned them down, I promise you. He didn't speak. He didn't speak, and he didn't speak well. But all of the countries in the Middle East, it could have, what we're doing now, it could have happened a long time ago, but it was strangled and set back almost irretrievably by the administrations of Barack Obama and then Joe Biden. It was, there was a hatred toward Israel. There was an absolute hatred. The setbacks really started when President Obama signed the Iran nuclear deal. This was a disaster for Israel, and it was a disaster for everyone. And I remember that Bibi Netanyahu came to the United States and worked so hard to try and get Obama not to do that deal. He worked so hard. But it was like talking to a wall. I remember him telling me it was like talking to a wall. They wanted to go with Iran. They chose Iran, frankly, over a lot of other good nations, but specifically Israel. And that was the beginning of a very bad period of time. You had Obama go out, and the Iran nuclear deal turned out to be a disaster. And by the way, I terminated the Iran nuclear deal, and I was very proud to do it. Yet even to Iran, whose regime has inflicted so much death on the Middle East, the hand of friendship and cooperation is open. I'm telling you, they want to make a deal. That's all I do in my life. I make deals. I'm good at it. I've always been good at it. And I know when they want. Even if they said, we don't want to make a deal, I can tell you they want to make a deal. All right, they do. They want to make a deal, and we're going to see if we can do something, because this is crazy what's happening, and we're not going to have this anymore. Neither the United States nor Israel bear the people of Iran any hostility. We merely want to live in peace. We don't want any looming threats over our heads, and we don't want to even think in terms of nuclear destruction. It's not going to happen, never will happen. There's nothing that would do more good for this part of the world than for Iran's leaders to renounce terror, stop threatening their neighbors, quit funding their militant proxies, and finally recognize Israel's right to existence. They have to do that. They have to do that. And to Iran, and as you know, this is not said out of weakness. There's no weakness. But I'm going to say this, that we are ready when you are, and it will be the best decision that Iran has ever made. And it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And they're good people. I know a lot of Iranians in the United States. They're good people, smart, hardworking people. They don't want to see what's happened to their country. The story of fierce Israeli resolve and triumph since October 7th should be proof to the entire world that those who seek to destroy this nation are doomed to bitter failure. The state of Israel is strong, and it will live and thrive forever. And that is why Israel will always remain a vital ally of the United States of America. Israelis share our values, field one of the world's most powerful militaries. You really do. You have an amazing, what a job you've done. And have one of the most innovative economies on earth. Those are just a few of the reasons why I'm proud to be the best friend that Israel has ever had. And they all say it in the White House. They all say it. I guess it's true because everybody says it, baby. You said it today. Thank you. But as president, I terminated the disastrous Iran nuclear deal, and ultimately I terminated Iran's nuclear program with things called B-2 bombers. It was swift, and it was accurate, and it was a military beauty. I authorized the spending of billions of dollars, which went to Israel's defense, as you know, and after years of broken promises from many other American presidents, you know that, they kept promising. I never understood it until I got there. There was a lot of pressure put on these presidents. It was put on me too, but I didn't yield to the pressure. But every president for decades said, we're going to do it. The difference is I kept my promise and officially recognized the capital of Israel and moved the American embassy to Jerusalem. Isn't that right, Miriam? Look at Miriam. She's back there. Stand up, Miriam. Stand up. Miriam and Sheldon would come into the office. They'd call me. He'd call me. I think they had more trips to the White House than anybody else I can think of. Look at her sitting there so innocently. She's got $60 billion in the bank, $60 billion. And I think she's saying no more. And she loves Israel, but she loves it, and they would come in, and her husband was a very aggressive man, but I loved him. He was a very aggressive, very supportive of me. And he'd call up, can I come over and see you? I say, Sheldon, I'm the president of the United States. It doesn't work that way. He'd come in, but they were very responsible for so much, including getting me thinking about Golan Heights, which is probably one of the greatest things to ever happen to Israel. Miriam, stand up, please. She really is. I mean, she loves this country. She loves this country. Her and her husband are so incredible. We miss him so dearly. But I actually asked her, I'm going to get her in trouble with this, but I actually asked her once, I said, so Miriam, I know you love Israel. What do you love more, the United States or Israel? She refused to answer. That might mean Israel, I must tell you. We love you. Thank you, darling, for being here. That's a great honor. Great honor. She's a wonderful woman. She is a great woman. I've always stood for the people of this community, and I always will. I'll always be with you. I'm always going to be with you. I guess maybe something could happen to change my mind. Somebody that's really stupid gets into office and wants to do really bad things, but that's about it. We don't think we're going to have that happen. I hope we're not going to have that happen. And this man is a good man right here. These two men are good men right here. Hey, I have an idea. Mr. President, why don't you give him a pardon? Give him a pardon. Come on. By the way, that was not in the speech, as you probably know. But I happen to like this gentleman right over here, and it just seems to make so much sense. You know, whether we like it or not, this has been one of the greatest wartime presidents. This has been one of the greatest wartime presidents. And cigars and champagne. Who the hell cares about that? All right, enough controversy for the day, right? It's actually, I don't think it's very controversial. So, you know, I mean, I see so popular. You are a very popular man. You know why? Because you know how to win. Over the past 2 years, I've met many of the families of the Israelis taken hostage and those that were taken hostage. Unbelievable. I've looked into their eyes. I've seen the worst nightmares of their suffering, but I've also seen something else, the beautiful love of the people, the love of people, frankly, that hold things together, the love that gives you the courage to carry on through thousands of years of persecution and repression and to emerge with the heart of David. It's the heart of David. It's that love that's defeated the enemies of civilization, built this incredible country and this unbelievable economy, and forged one of the great democracies of the world. That is why it's a true honor to stand here today and address this assembly in your ancient and eternal now capital, Jerusalem. I'm proud to have helped in that regard. This city and this nation stand as living proof that a much brighter future for this entire region is truly within our grasp. For thousands of years, Jerusalem has been a home to Christians, Jews, Muslims, and people of all ethnicities and creeds. This is the holy center of the world's three great Abrahamic faiths. I like that too. Adorned, it's the first time I've seen that word in a while. Adorned with their sacred sites and alive with their pilgrims and visitors from every corner of the globe. But here between the Western Wall, the Temple Mount, and the hill called Calvary, people of every faith and background live, work, pray, serve, and raise their families side by side, and they do it with love. This example is just one of the modern miracles that Israel has given to the world. And just in closing, the leaders in this chamber know better than anyone else the challenges of this harmony, and it's been easily won. No, it hasn't. It has not been. It's been so tough, but it has been, some say, a miracle. What you've done is a miracle. Look at your size. Look at your chances when it all started. And you know, if you think about it, you are safer today, stronger today, and more respected today than at any time in the history of Israel. Think of it. People used to say it wouldn't exist. They don't say that anymore, do they? Yet if safety, security, and coexistence can thrive here in the winding alleys and ancient paths of Jerusalem, then surely peace and respect can flourish among the nations of the broader Middle East. The God who once dwelled among his people in this city still calls us, in the words of Scripture, the turn from evil and do good, to seek peace and pursue it. So he still whispers truth into the hills and knolls and valleys of his magnificent creation, and he still writes hope into the hearts of his children all over the world. And that is why even after 3,000 years of pain and conflict, the people of Israel have never given up from the threats of Zionism, from all sorts of threats. You want the promise of Zion. You want the promise of success and hope and love and God. And the people of America have never lost faith in the promise of a great and blessed future for all of us. From the very first day that modern Israel was founded, we have stood together through thick and thin, the thin of setbacks, and through victory and defeat, through glory and heartache. We have built industries together. We have made discoveries together. We have confronted evil together, and we have waged war together, and perhaps, most beautifully of all, we have made peace together. And this week, against all odds, we have done the impossible and brought our hostages home. So now we're going to forge a future that is worthy of our heritage. We're going to build a legacy that all the people of this region can be proud of. New bonds of friendship, cooperation, and commerce will join Tel Aviv to Dubai, Haifa to Beirut, Jerusalem to Damascus, and from Israel to Egypt, from Saudi Arabia to Qatar, from India to Pakistan, from Indonesia to Iraq, from Syria to Bahrain, Turkey to Jordan, the United Arab Emirates to Oman, and Armenia to Azerbaijan, another war that I just settled. We are going to have hope, harmony, opportunity, and happiness here in the spiritual and geographic center of the entire world. That's what you are. Israel, America, and all of the nations of the Middle East will soon be safer, stronger, greater, and more prosperous than ever before. And I want to thank you all once again for this exceptional honor. This has been truly an honor. It's seldom that a president is invited to do this. And I love Israel. I'm with you all the way. You will be bigger, better, stronger, and more loving than ever before. Thank you very much. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. And God bless the Middle East. Thank you, everybody. Good luck. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Donald Trump speaking live at the Knesset there. There's quite a few highlights on there where, at the moment where he was interrupted by a left-wing politician who heckled him, but he remained remarkably calm and cool. I thought he remained collected. He carried on. And there were other moments there where he pointed out a moment when Benjamin Netanyahu had called, he said he'd called them for weapons many, many times, asking him for different weapons. He said, Bibi would call me so many times, can you get me this weapon, that weapon? He pointed out that America have the best weapons ever. He vowed never to forget October the 7th, describing the Hamas attack. Thousands of innocent Israeli civilians were attacked by terrorists in one of the most evil and heinous desecrations of innocent life the world has ever seen. He called it the worst slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust, which I think many will agree. So he praised also the opposition leader, Yair Lapid, calling him a very nice guy. And he's a nice man and asked Bibi to get on with it.
Well, of course, we're looking now at these celebrations in Tel Aviv, in Hostages Square, the area of Tel Aviv that became renamed in the cultural imagination in the wake of the horrific October the 7th attacks. But this is not just a moment to look back, it's also a moment to look forward. In his speech, Donald Trump spoke about his relationship with Muslim Arab nations, wealthy Arab nations, who he said would pay for the rebuilding of Gaza. Let's take a moment to absorb what has just happened, the enormity of the state of affairs in the Middle East today, and speak to our political editor, Chris Hope, joined by our Home and Security editor, Mark White, as well. Chris, first, the political reaction there. What a moment we've just seen.
Yeah, no surprise they're playing Tina Turner, Simply the Best, now in Hostages Square. On the back of that speech, they absolutely loved Donald Trump out there. He was called a colossus, wasn't he, by adoring Israeli politicians. His language is fascinating. He said the hostages are back, standing ovation. He said, my personality is all about stopping wars. It's often overlooked by his critics that he's a 79-year-old grandfather who does want to end the fighting. Next step for him will be Ukraine and dealing with that war. But he does want to end fighting. I think that's where he sees his legacy. The skies are calm, the guns are silenced, the sirens are still, he says. It's the end of a war, the end of an age of terror, and death and the beginning of the age of faith and hope and of God. You have here a very passionate speech, and of course it wasn't meant to go on for so long. That was an hour long of that speech, wasn't it?
It almost goes back to that old Ronald Reagan quote, you know, speak softly but carry a big stick. When people think of Donald Trump, they think about power. I mean, renaming the Department of Defense the Department of War. It's very easy to think, because this is the guy that bombed the Iranian nuclear facility. This is the guy that speaks about the power and might of the American military. It's easy to think of Donald Trump as a warmonger, but no. The idea of having a powerful military is that no one will dare go to war with you. It's that idea of peace through strength. And that, I think, is what Donald Trump wants to deliver, wants to represent. But Mark White, you've been covering, of course, this war. You were out in the Middle East, you were out in Israel in the weeks after October the 7th. Did you ever think we'd see scenes like this?
No, I was just thinking, actually, as we were watching these images, how that square has changed. I was there a number of times in the days after the 7th of October, and what a sad and sombre place it was, of course it was, where the families of those who had been kidnapped and others who had been murdered had come to pray, to hope that eventually their loved ones would be released. And of course now, over 2 years later, we see the final hostages coming home, 20 of them still alive, sadly around 28 who have died out in Gaza and whose remains are being repatriated instead. But just looking at the square there, just the scenes now of relief and jubilation with a sense of hope. And I think that was embodied in the speech that Donald Trump gave to the Knesset. It was all about this eye to the future. You've come so far, but we've got to go on and push for peace and a more constructive future for Gaza. And that's why he was urging those nations around Israel's neighbours, to invest in the future of Gaza and not in weapons for Gaza to arm a terrorist entity like Hamas that only ever had murder on its mind.
Well, it's quite unprecedented, isn't it, the collaboration of all the different leaders. And what he was talking about was a peace forever. He actually used that word, which having seen this, I could envisage that perhaps people will prefer peace to war, which is something that he emphasised. And of course, another point he made, because he's meant to be somewhere else, he's quite late, he blamed that on Benjamin Netanyahu and said he went on for too long. So he had there was a bit of humour in his speech, as well as the way he delivered it. And you know, he deserved his moment there, to have a good hour, to be appreciated, I think, by the Arab leaders and, of course, the rest of the world.
Yeah, and it's how he does diplomacy that is so different to what has gone before, that it's kind of shock and awe, isn't it? It's the force of personality. He's a strong man in charge of a very strong nation that other nations absolutely, you know, want to be a part of. And I think we're looking there at images of more of these prisoners released back into Gaza. Now, this is one part of what we're witnessing, which is very unpalatable, of course, for many people in Israel, but is vital if they are to secure a long-lasting peace process in that region. So Donald Trump, as I say, you know, is that force of personality. Get away from the diplomacy as such, pull the sides together, demand that they start taking action, acting responsibility. And that's why, you know, in his first term, he wanted to do things differently, get off to the region, make allies in the region, ensure that those countries in the region started embarking on a more constructive process with their neighbour Israel, which was what the Abraham Accords was all about. And that's a process he wants to continue. And that's what's different to what's gone before. And it might just work.
Well, Mark, let's stay on these remarkable pictures here in the heart of Gaza, seeing some of these 1,700 detainees being released by Israel back into Gaza. Some of these people, terrorists. Let's not beat around the bush. Some of these people convicted for murder, for bombing, but this is part of what a reconciliation and a peace looks like. There are going to have to be very difficult sort of words to swallow and things to bite on either side of this. Let's speak now to the former editor of the Jerusalem Post, Yaakov Katz. Yaakov, thanks indeed for joining us. We're going to stay on these pictures here. I want to get your reaction, first of all, to a part of the deal that perhaps hasn't got enough coverage. Indeed, these detainees being released from the Israeli side.
Well, this is the price that Israel has paid to make this deal possible and to be able to get back the 20 living hostages and hopefully as many of the 28 deceased hostages whose bodies remain in Hamas captivity. Israel has had to release almost 2,000 prisoners in total, about 1,700 of those who we're seeing now, and another 250 prisoners who are serving life sentences in Israel. These are not people who were just picked up because they might have thrown a rock. These are people literally with the blood of people, of Israelis, of Jews, and also Arab Israelis on their hands. These are people who murdered Israelis, and now Israel's releasing them. And this is a risk that the country is taking. It's a calculated one, but it is one that it is taking in order to get its own people back. And I think we saw those images earlier today of the release of those 20 hostages. It's well worth it.
Yaakov, do you believe that actually, because Donald Trump was saying a lasting peace forever, do you feel that there is a kind of change and a shift in the mindset now, and that this could potentially be something that could be achieved?
Look, lasting peace is not where we're at the moment. I mean, we're looking at these images that you're showing right now of these terrorists and these prisoners returning to Gaza. And you see just in the images in front of our eyes, armed men who are on the streets there. Hamas is still there. Hamas is not gone. And this is the complexity of this deal that was reached is, okay, we did this the swap. Israel released the prisoners. We got back the hostages. The war is now over, as Donald Trump has declared, and there's going to be the summit later today in Egypt where Trump is going to be signing a deal that declares the war over. But what about Hamas? Who ensures that they don't rebuild? Who is going to be the force that's going to confront them on the ground in Gaza? Who's going to police Gaza? Who's going to govern Gaza? What's going to happen if Hamas tries to reconstitute itself? Will Israel have the right to attack, to stop them? I mean, there's a lot of details here, and the devil is going to be in the details for us to really achieve that peace. But I think we can say is that having this war over does create opportunity for us right now to be able to move forward with the prospect of normalization with other countries in the region. There's news already of the president of Indonesia, I think the largest Muslim country, 280 million people. It might be coming to Israel already tomorrow. There's the prospect of renewed talks with Saudi Arabia and other countries. Donald Trump just spoke about that in his speech before the Israeli legislator. So is there hope? Yes, but we're going to have to work hard to get there.
It's going to be such a long process. But of course, the 20-point plan outlined by Donald Trump at the end of last month did set forward sort of this staged withdrawal. When we're talking about the ceasefire and the Israeli withdrawal, it's only to a line. It's not out of all of Gaza. There is still that sort of, each stage of this process will be another stage of withdrawal, the setup of the Board of Peace, which Donald Trump spoke at length about in his speech in the Knesset. I suppose these will all be crucial elements in terms of the future governance of Gaza and the security guarantees that Israel so desperately needs.
100%. And the perimeter where Israel has now withdrawn, which is basically leaves Israel in control of just about 50% of the Gaza Strip. It's more along the border. It's no longer deeper inside the civilian population centers. But what this does mean essentially is that Israel does have leverage. And if the Palestinians in Gaza want Israel to completely evacuate and withdraw, we are going to have to see progress on those other issues. In other words, the governance of Gaza, who is going to be this new governing entity, and the so-called ISF, the International Security Force that Donald Trump has spoken about, that is part of that 20-point plan that's going to be supported and funded and manned by different Arab countries in this region. All of that will have to happen before we see a complete Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. Israel is not just going to pull out like it did back 20 years ago in 2005 and throw away the keys and hope and pray that everything's going to be okay. Israel today has learned its lesson in that sense. And therefore, if they do want Israel out of Gaza, we're going to have to see major progress on those other fronts that ensure that Hamas is stopped and Hamas is disarmed and Hamas no longer controls the Gaza Strip.
All right, Yaakov Katz, thank you very much. He's the editor of the Jerusalem Post.
Right, let's turn straight to Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister now, Sharon Haskell, who joins us fresh from being inside the Knesset, where Donald Trump gave that speech, the Israeli parliament, of course. Sharon, thank you so much for making the time for us this afternoon. Firstly, just give us a sense of the atmosphere there in the Knesset.
Oh, wow.
I mean, what a remarkable moment in history.
Incredible. Yeah, it is a historical moment, one of those great moments that will be remembered in the book of history. And, you know, the Jewish people, they remember historical events. We cherish them in our heart. This was extremely special. This was during the times that our hostages, the live hostages, are returning. We're receiving, in the meantime, those images coming back, hugging their families, the tears, the cries of their families. It was just absolutely incredible. And President Trump's word really resonates, amongst all of us parliament members and so many dignitaries who came, whether it's ambassadors, delegations from the United States, and people who have been working for 2 years on assisting Israel in one of the most difficult times, including our dear friend who was just here in the planetary as well, Lord Stuart Pollack, who's been advocating and supporting Israel in those most difficult times. It was really remarkable and touching.
I want to ask you, because there was that interruption during his speech when Donald Trump was heckled by a left-wing member of the Knesset. Can you tell us, give us more information? I mean, who was it, and what were they actually saying? We couldn't get a really good picture as to who they were and what they were saying.
Yeah, I was trying to read. So this is two members of the Communist Party. In the Knesset, Israel is a democracy. Many are represented. There is an Arab Communist Party. Both of them are members of that party. They were holding a sign, but we are pretty accustomed or provocation. This is a historic moment. This is a historic moment where President Trump have outlaid his vision on how we can create real peace, one that speaks about stability, about coexistence, where the Israelis and the Palestinians will be able to live side by side, which is the most important thing, more than slogans, more than obsessions. Some of these members were marching down the streets during the times of war, which was very difficult to see and to hear. We have a dispute, we disagree. They are a very small minority, but just to disrespect such an important moment in Israel's history, while our hostages are coming back, is absolutely unacceptable. Both of them were thrown out within a few seconds.
Sharon, I believe we've just been looking at the helicopter of President Donald Trump. He, of course, is on his way to Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt for the peace ceremony that we're expecting in the next hour or so. So we were looking at those pictures just as you were speaking there about those two communist members of the Knesset. I suppose the very fact that there are Arab communist members in the Knesset who disagree so fundamentally with the government of Israel speaks to the lie that sometimes people put about, that Israel is somehow an apartheid society. I mean, apartheid societies don't tend to have the people that they're supposedly oppressing within their own parliament.
Many of these people in the demonstrations in the streets of London don't really know our history, don't know our culture, don't know Israel, and don't know our democracy. They chant that this is an apartheid state. But then you see those Arab, Muslims and Christians and Druze and Bedouins, part of every aspect of our society, whether they are doctors and nurses and heads of hospitals here in Israel, whether they are lecturing in universities and rectors in universities, whether they are judges in our courts, including our high Supreme Courts, who have Arab Muslim judges. Try and imagine that for an apartheid state, and they have no idea that there's not just one Arab party, but two Arab parties here in the parliament, and many members of the Arab community are actually serving in other parties as well, like the Labour Party or the Likud Party and other parties throughout our history. They don't know that. They are fixed on a lot of lies and propaganda that was fed to them by those radical Islamist communist group. We've seen those marches with similar posters in New York and in London, supported by those radical organizations.
I don't know whether you've had a chance to, you probably are aware of it, that our Education Minister Bridget Phillipson suggested that that they were part of the reason why this peace deal has occurred. Did you manage to hear about that? And if you did, what were your thoughts on it?
Well, I heard about it and I commented about it yesterday. Unfortunately, I have to disagree with that assumption. I think that when you see after your declaration, Hamas, a terrorist organization, that everybody in the international community that have accepted Trump's peace plan, the second stage as well, including Egypt and Jordan and Turkey and Qatar, and even the Palestinian Authority. And the Trump peace plan, the second stage, speaks about how Hamas cannot have any aspect or any future in the Palestinian governance, not from a civilian point of view and not from a military point of view. And that terrorist organization that have created chaos and destruction and death and abused Israelis and Palestinians is thanking you for your actions. You must know you're on the wrong side of history. You must know that during the last negotiation, you've emboldened Hamas's position instead of actually pushing them, pressuring them towards accepting that deal. That was 2 months ago. But thank God now, with President Trump, with the military pressure that we've been putting on Hamas, and his pressure putting on Hamas and other countries, including Turkey and Qatar, who were vital in pressuring Hamas into this deal. They have a lot of leverage. We were able to secure this deal.
Ask you again, though, did recognizing a Palestinian state help or hinder this process, in your view?
I think that, Secretary of State Marco Rubio summed it up pretty accurately, that those declarations during the last negotiations, roughly about 2 months ago, have emboldened Hamas' position and drove them away from signing a ceasefire. It means that without those declarations of a Palestinian state or revising that, or those declarations of the foreign minister of the Netherlands who suggested that the European Union boycott Israel, I believe that Hamas would have signed a peace agreement already 2 months ago. And unfortunately, they pushed it further away.
Interesting. I've got to say, though, we're looking at this 20-point peace plan. We're doing tentative baby steps towards it today. Step 1, in effect, is today. But if we go all the way down to step 19 of this plan, that, of course, is that the conditions may finally be in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood. Those words are written in the plan. The plan itself, signed by Israel and Hamas, says we recognise the aspiration of the Palestinian people towards statehood. Can you, Sharon Haskell, as Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister, see a Palestinian state at the end of this process?
Look, it's important to understand that Trump right now is speaking about physical steps that are going to create an atmosphere and a reality where Israelis and Palestinians can actually live together. Are we there right now? No, we're very far. There isn't a single Palestinian leader who can say out clearly in Arabic to put weapons aside, to put the violence aside, that the Jews here in Israel are not going anywhere, they're not the enemy, and that we are willing to live side by side. Not a single Palestinian leader. And why is that? I'm not even talking about the corruption among the Palestinian leadership, but I'm talking, for example, about the education, the indoctrination in mosques, the religious indoctrination. And these are the points that even now President Trump have spoken in his speech, because they are the vital step, the first one that we need to take in order to make sure that we can really live side by side. Let's talk about education. Let's talk about economy. Let's talk about the radicalization. Let's talk about security, safety, stability. I mean, think about it. For more than 20
Incredibly important
years
points,
now.
Sharon, but just to press you on that question, can Israel, can the Israeli government, of which you are a member, really envisage a Palestinian state at the end of this process? It may be a far way away, but step 19,
Look,
can you envisage a Palestinian state?
I'll tell you personally, and unfortunately, after that tragedy that we've experienced and knowing, who we are dealing with, the first thing I would say that a Palestinian statehood and a declaration, some kind of a self-determination does not necessarily means the obsession or the vision of Macron of a two-state solution. And that's very important to understand. Self-determination has many different forms. And this is something that maybe we will have to find a path towards it in the future. Unfortunately, right now,
what does self-determination mean if it's not statehood?
Look, there's been many plans and many ideas, including the idea of the tribes. There are many tribes and clans among Palestinians. Some of them have risen in recent months requesting independency as a clan in the areas of Hebron. There's a lot to talk about that, and different forms where you can actually give independency and self-determination. These are in-depth problems. The first step that we need to take is de-radicalization of an entire population that's been indoctrinated by a terrorist organization for so many years. As the Prime Minister Netanyahu said, we cannot see a two-state solution, definitely not now. There's been a vast majority here in the Knesset who voted against that because we understand the reality. And the reality is, if you even have elections now in what you call the West Bank, the areas of Judea and Samaria, where the Palestinian Authority is, Kstarmer actually said that the Palestinian Authority can be a leader of the Palestinian people. How does that work with democracy? And how does that work with fighting corruption? Because as far as we know, the last elections that were in those Palestinian territories in Judea and Samaria, and we know by every poll that if we go into elections tomorrow, Hamas is the one that is going to win those elections. So the fact is that this is giving a state to the same terrorist organization we've been fighting for the last 2 years. And so when Prime Minister Netanyahu says that this is not a position we can speak about right now, we have to lay the foundation ground to see how we can live first side by side in peace, in coexistence and stability.
All right, Sharon, thank you very much. Really good to talk to you. That is Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister, Sharon Haskell, who joins us now fresh from Donald Trump's speech at the Israeli Parliament.
Really fascinating there that Israel is not willing to say that a two-state solution is at the end point of this, despite it being written in the plan.
Yes, but realistically, what she is saying is that they are not ready in terms of Hamas being ready for that, because Hamas, remember, there's been a heavy indoctrination, the hate of Jewish people. The children have been educated in that way. It's no secret that has been happening. So what she's saying is right now, if there was an election, Hamas would win. So we can't do that yet.
But I don't see why a Palestinian state need be democratic. The most successful Arab states are not democratic.
Well, I mean, I think you'd have a problem with that, really, because I think...
Just run it as an emirate.
A theocratic regime.
Well, yeah, you just need a good, strong hand of a sheikh to make sure that it's a peaceful state. I mean, I don't see why we've got this sort of idea that every country in the world must be democratic at this moment in time. It might be too premature for democracy.
Well, let's put it this way. When you have the interim administration that will be running Gaza, that will not be a government that is going out and looking for free and fair elections at the moment. It's going to preside over the governance of that state until much further down the road.
Just as in Japan, it was 10 years before democracy was set up after the Second World War.
Well, yes,
just as in Germany after the Second World War, there was no democracy for
that is the goal, ultimately. But at the moment, there'll be an interim government who will look after everything, get it in shape. But at some point, point 19, then there may be the elections, and they're ready for us to...
How do you make it legitimate? That's the point.
Yes, big questions there.
Big question,
but
big question, too big for us. We can't answer it, can we? Maybe Olivia can.
This is what a fantastic segue. Let's speak to our political correspondent Olivia Utley live from Downing Street, because Olivia, while this has been going on in Israel, there's been quite the controversy here in London.
Well, absolutely, and politically it's very lucky for Keir Starmer that today is such a big foreign news day, because if it weren't, we would all be talking about the collapse of this China spying case. Now, Keir Starmer is in really, really hot water over this. There are allegations printed over the weekend that his national security advisor, Jonathan Powell, who is also a very close personal ally of the Prime Minister, essentially allowed the case against these two men accused of spying for China. He allowed that case to collapse in order to politically further Britain's relationship with Beijing. Now, in the very long lobby meeting I've just come out of now, the Prime Minister's chief spokesman said that that was categorically untrue, that Jonathan Powell did not deliberately nix the government's evidence to make that trial collapse. The government is claiming that this is all the fault of the Tories, the previous government, for not updating the Official Secrets Act. So what the government is essentially saying is that the CPS were unable to prosecute because the threshold for China to be designated a threat to the UK was incredibly high, and that was all the fault of the Tories. Essentially, that this was all a technicality because the old laws weren't very good and weren't updated properly. It still leaves a lot of questions unanswered. Who was negotiating, for example, on behalf of the government? Who was the CPS was asking and asking for months and months and months to have evidence to help convict these two men accused of spying for China, and someone in the government was answering their questions. Who was answering their questions, and why was that evidence not received by the CPS? Now, the government claims that it wasn't received because China simply couldn't be designated a threat because the previous government refused to designate China as a threat. Officially, that is true, but there's plenty of evidence on and off the record showing that previous ministers in the last government did consider that China was an epoch-defining challenge, they said, and that there were all sorts of threats from China. So there is a lot of people are saying that actually, if the government had really wanted to help the CPS make those prosecutions, it could have provided a little bit more evidence than it provided. So the question being levelled at Keir Starmer now is it really true that you did everything in your power, that your ministers did everything in your power, that your national security advisor did everything in his power to help the CPS find the evidence to prosecute these men? Or is there a possibility that it was more politically convenient for Britain, when Britain obviously wants closer relationship with China, to let this case be swept under the rug? And I think there are going to be a lot more questions for Keir Starmer to answer on that, not least from Priti Patel, the Shadow Home Secretary in the House of Commons.
Where it all ties together, is it not? The National Security Advisor, Jonathan Powell, a behind-the-scenes figure, a huge figure who worked for Tony Blair when he was Prime Minister, was brought back in by Keir Starmer, the man behind the Chagos deal, the giveaway of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, the man who's currently in Sharm el-Sheikh, who has been praised for his work on this peace deal in the Middle East, but a man under fire as that National Security Advisor who could have been behind the collapse of the trial of these Chinese spies. Olivia, there was a strange tweet this morning from the American Special Peace envoy Steve Witkoff, in the early hours of this morning, peculiarly, I've never seen one of these before, singling out Jonathan Powell to thank him for the incredible input in the peace deal with Hamas and Israel. I mean, what a curious thing to have tweeted. Has the government got anything to say about that?
Well, absolutely. It's a sort of amusingly helpful tweet there. Jonathan Powell, as you say, is in very, very hot water here over allegations that he helped that case collapse. And now Steve Witkoff tweets out saying thank you very much to the UK for helping secure peace in Gaza, and particularly names Jonathan Powell. That is very, very convenient, particularly as high-up members of Trump's administration were accusing Bridget Phillipson of being delusional by saying that the UK helped with the Gaza peace deal. So that's very, very helpful from Steve Witkoff. We asked the Prime Minister's chief spokesman in lobby today whether the UK perhaps gave a little nudge, asked in fact the US administration to tweet out something helpful to give Jonathan Powell a little bolster. Well, the Prime Minister's chief spokesman say, well, I couldn't answer anything about that. I don't know anything about that. But there was perhaps a little bit of a wink, nudge atmosphere in the room at the moment. Is it possible that the UK asked the US to do something helpful about Jonathan Powell? The question is, will it be helpful enough? At the moment, the government is saying that they have full confidence in National Security Advisor Jonathan Powell, but we all know that doesn't really mean anything. Quite often a minister will say that, and the next day that minister will have to resign. And at the moment, these questions just are not going away for Jonathan Powell.
Yeah, Utley, thank you very much. I have every confidence in you. Goodbye. That's what's possibly going to be happening now, but if you've just tuned in, welcome. It is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. You join us at an historic day. Donald Trump has spoken, and he's on his way now to Egypt, to the summit where other leaders will be to discuss this big peace deal between, of course, he's about to leave. He hasn't left, but he's on his way. He's getting ready to leave so he can discuss, but he's very late.
It is incredibly late. I mean, we were expecting this peace ceremony in Sharm el-Sheikh to basically be done and dusted by now. It's running about 3 hours late because everyone witted on in the Knesset for quite so long. Perhaps not witted on. Perhaps that's unkind. That's unfair. This was, of course, an historic moment. This was a huge moment, not just for Donald Trump, but also for Benjamin Netanyahu. Everyone wanted to say their piece on what will be remembered as a monumental day. This war that has defined so much of international politics over after more than 2 years, after such devastation and disruption, after such global tumult, not just in the area of Gaza, but inspiring those rocket attacks from Iran, those incredible scenes that we saw of those flares across the sky of Israeli cities, the concern that basically the whole world had for global security, the oil price that we pay at our pumps. This is so interconnected.
Well, I'm wondering now, will the International Criminal Court still want a warrant didn't they want one for Benjamin Netanyahu? Now, he, I would say, is one of the great instigators of peace by peace through strength, which is one of the things they talked about. Christopher Hope, where do you sit on that one?
Well, let's see how it plays out. I mean, I think the issue of we are on day one and we never even got towards stage two, which has been discussed in Sharm el-Sheikh shortly, and how that plays out, the fact that you haven't got Bibi Netanyahu going to Sharm el-Sheikh for that made the photograph ever wanted, which is him in the same room as the head of the Palestinian Authority. That won't happen now we're told, for religious reasons, and important to be in Israel tonight for the Jewish faith, etc. So that's a shame, but let's hope it plays out well. We're looking now on screens, of course, of happiness, thankfully, in Hospital Square, and we'll see how the world can get around them. I was struck also by the amount of money which Donald Trump said was going towards Gaza. This idea of creating a kind of a Gaza on sea, to use or the language used by
the Riviera.
Yeah, but
wasn't there a video?
There will be a lot of yes, an AI video. A lot of money is going to be flowing towards Gaza, and interesting to see how much that goes in and how quickly that
could it really be a new restored. Abu Dhabi or Dubai?
Let's hope so.
Well, why not?
Well, let's speak some more on this with the political commentator at the Jewish Insider, Lahav Harkov. Lahav, thanks so much for being with us on this such a monumentous day for Israel, for the Palestinian people, frankly for the whole world. Do you see this peace process as something that is sustainable?
I think that you have to look at what's going on in Gaza to understand that maybe the more intense phase of the war is over, but the war isn't totally over. The hostages are home, which was an important goal for Israel. But Hamas is now trying to reestablish itself in the places from which Israel withdrew. They're executing their opponents, and there's battles on the street. And Israel has vowed and continued to vow, including after signing this agreement, that Hamas will be disarmed, and is talking about destroying and eliminating the Hamas tunnels with international cooperation. So, that might ultimately lead to a more peaceful outcome, but I think we're still going to see some fireworks in Gaza.
I suppose, though, here is that, as you said, it's with international cooperation. It's not just Donald Trump going out on his own or Benjamin Netanyahu on his own. Trump has managed to broker a deal using all of most of the Arab world who've all come to the table. So do you not get a sense that this actually could stick and it is different?
I don't actually, not in the sense, I don't mean to be this great pessimist here. I just think that there's a lot of steps to go, right? And that if we all just say we're celebrating now and the war is over and this is great and we try to rest on our laurels, then it won't last. There are a lot of steps to Trump's plan, and without following through on maybe not all of them, but most of them, then, Hamas or Islamic Jihad or similar could rise up again in Gaza.
This is, of course, such a difficult step to look at. Of course, we're only at such tentative moments at the start of this peace process. There are 20 full steps in this process, and some of those steps involve setting up institutions like the Board of Peace that then will themselves create more steps. I mean, this is going to be one of the most complicated and intricate and difficult things to sustain. And I suppose looking around the world at peace processes that we've seen, perhaps even closer to home in Northern Ireland, we know that, when a deal is signed, that's the very beginning, not close to the end.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. There's something very fitting to the fact that you have 30 countries from around the world coming into Egypt to celebrate, and that the actual combatants in the war aren't there, because there's just a long way to go, and Israelis know that this isn't the end. I mean, Israelis are celebrating today. There is joy, really ecstasy in the air in Israel, because we're so happy to have the hostages back. But I think that Israelis know that, Hamas isn't gone, and there's just more to be done.
Now, how do you feel about Britain's involvement? Bridget Phillipson seemed to suggest that we were instrumental in getting this peace deal done. But on a whole, how do you feel about the United Kingdom, especially for the pro-Palestine protests? And in particular as well, the words from Bridget Phillipson, whether you find that quite irritating or whether you feel whether she's right in some way.
I don't think the question is so much whether I'm irritated. I just haven't seen any evidence of what she's saying being true. And what I have seen is the Starmer government being obstructive to the process of ending the war by recognizing a Palestinian state. We know that when those announcements were made, first by France, but then they managed to convince the Brits to follow, there was a process going on of negotiations between Israel and Hamas. This was in July, and Hamas then hardened its stance, and that process fell apart, not to be revived again until September. So I think that the UK actually had a negative influence, and it's unfortunate.
Do you think that, in your view, negative influence is because everything was premature there? I mean, can you see a situation, perhaps years down the line, where this process does ultimately end in self-determination for the Palestinian people, as is written in the peace plan, that this process does end in some form of two-state solution?
I think that serious changes, just as the process says, need to be made in order for that to happen. I think right now, look, the Palestinians are deeply divided, but there are a lot of countries out there that are divided, so that maybe they can do it while being divided, but they're sort of deeply corrupt. They have an education system that's very focused on inciting against Israel, and they just have a lot of changes they have to make before they can get themselves on their own 2 feet. And a lot of those changes aren't being made because they haven't been willing to make them, and also because they've been so reliant on donations from around the world that they haven't tried to make their own sort of more independent economy, for example. Like they just really don't have an independent economy at this point. And so can it happen down the road? Perhaps, and the Trump plan certainly describes steps that would be helpful to that, but I just don't think they're there right now.
Lahav, I'm just going to interrupt you very briefly to say we're looking at new pictures on our screen live where Donald Trump's motorcade is heading to an airport there in Jerusalem. We can see this motorcade here because, of course, this whole sort of theatre of today, if you like, has been delayed significantly. Donald Trump will be getting on board Air Force One any moment now in real time as he then heads on to Sharm el-Sheikh to this peace ceremony. Lahav, what can you tell us about what this peace ceremony might look like? And of course, there's been some confusion as to whether or not Benjamin Netanyahu would be in attendance, and we believe now that he won't be.
So Netanyahu initially was not invited. And there are a lot of countries there that are, frankly, hostile to Israel. There are countries that don't have relations with Israel and are not hostile, but there are countries that are outright hostile to Israel that were invited. And I think that says a lot, right? Like this process depends on Israel having a buy-in, and of course, Israel agreed to the Trump plan. Earlier today, President Trump called President Sisi of Egypt with Netanyahu in the room and basically invited Netanyahu instead of Sisi inviting Netanyahu. But ultimately, Netanyahu decided not to travel. The stated reason was because there's a Jewish holiday starting in a couple of hours and he wouldn't make it back to Israel on time. And traditionally, Israeli leaders, prime ministers, presidents don't violate the holiday or the Sabbath in public. That being said, I think it's because there are a lot of countries there that have tried to sort of diplomatically trap Israel in the last year. And it's not just the countries that are openly hostile to Israel. It's also the UK, France, Canada, Australia. And Netanyahu doesn't want to walk into that trap knowingly.
All right, Lahav Harkov, thank you very much. Really good to talk to you. That's Lahav Harkov, Jewish insider. She's a commentator from there. Right. So Mark White joins us as well in the studio. Mark, quite an historic moment. Incredible scenes. Of course, we've got Air Force One, Donald Trump getting ready to board.
Yes, and of course, Donald Trump didn't want to get on Air Force One until he was assured that the process of releasing the hostages was underway. But of course, with that assurance, with the process fully embarked on, and of course now with all of those hostages who are alive having now entered Israel and are currently being assessed and treated at hospitals in the Tel Aviv area, it was clear for Donald Trump to come on this historic visit to Israel to, yes, lap up the applause, but many would say absolutely well-deserved by the absolute force of will of the US president to get these sides together, to agree not on what we've seen previously over the last 2 years, is this kind of piecemeal approach to releasing a few hostages here and a few hostages there, but actually just to get this over with, to get all of the remaining living hostages and the remains of those who sadly died released, so that the process can properly be embarked on. And that process, at least the initial stages of it, are underway, and it appears that they are underway without hitch. We've got peace for once in Gaza over the last 2 years. I say we've got peace in Gaza. There are some reports of skirmishes that have been taking place in central Gaza amongst Hamas and some of the rival militias in that enclave. And that's one of the many concerns in this process as we embark on trying to get a deal to take hold and to last any period of time is the potential for infighting there. We know that there has been a growing resistance within Gaza against Hamas, and now obviously some of these rival militias, seeing how weakened this wounded beast that is this terror organisation, are clearly there is that real scope for this deteriorating into more violence, interfactional violence within Gaza itself.
Well, it can't help, Mark, that they've got a load of prisoners who've just been released as well.
Well,
that's not going to help.
Indeed, which is why you need to get this process of the interim administration in place, but in the meantime, this force that is going to take over, that's effectively a force of Egyptians and others from that region as the peacekeeping force effectively within Gaza while Israel pulls back from some of the population centres in Gaza. They need that in place. They need this process to take hold so that it's not just a one-day wonder of the hostages being released, but we're still back to more fighting within Gaza itself.
I thought we had 2 Air Force Ones. I mean, there's only one Air Force One.
There are more than 2 Air Force Ones.
We're looking at the one on the tarmac. Is there another one somewhere else?
In fact, it's the case that there aren't any Air Force Ones until the President of the United States...
Any aircraft that the President gets
exactly.
on.
But where is But there's usually another one on the tarmac.
No, it's Marine ones.
This is Marine one now.
So, no.
If he gets in the helicopter.
Hang on. This will be Air Force One when Donald Trump steps on board, but it's the helicopters that travel in pairs. Air Force One can travel alone, but when Donald Trump is on... When Donald Trump...
How dare you? How very dare you?
When Donald Trump is on a helicopter, it's called Marine One, and they always travel in pairs. But Air Force One can and does travel alone because it is so large and
it's called Marine One when it's a Marine Corps helicopter, Tom, so shall we get into the...
We can get
call signs of other aircraft?
I'm sure there were 2 of these last time that looked almost identical and we didn't know which one he was
Last time we were looking at Joint Air Force Base Andrews in Maryland where they do keep them, so I think perhaps that could have been the case.
So you have currently 2 747s, but there are other types of aircraft that are used by the likes of the Secretary of State and other senior government officials when they're travelling doing the US government's business.
And of course it's Air Force 2 when the Vice President is on board.
Absolutely is, Tom,
but we should just say that it's just gone, 4 minutes ago, 2 o'clock. You're listening and watching to Good Afternoon Britain here on GB News with me, Tom Harwood, and Nana Akua. We're looking at live pictures of the airfield there in Jerusalem, where there is such a ceremony imbued with meaning here. A red carpet, flags of different nations, the President of the United States about to board that aircraft to head to a special ceremony for peace.
And he's been there after a lengthy standing ovation after his wonderful speech, which he did. It was late because Benjamin Netanyahu, who he came, took so long. But loads more to get through. You can see they're all on the tarmac now. Seems to be quite a few others there getting ready for Donald Trump to arrive and then get on board what will be Air Force One, as I understand.
And we can see on our screens here Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, standing there on the tarmac. He's travelled in that motorcade, and we are... and this is interesting, of course, Mark White, because Benjamin Netanyahu, we understand, will not be going to the peace ceremony in Egypt.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't originally invited, but Donald Trump, on landing in Tel Aviv, I think initially, was, I think, quite keen that Benjamin Netanyahu did attend the summit in Sharm el-Sheikh and basically brokered a call between Benjamin Netanyahu and the president of Egypt, al-Sisi. The 2 leaders had not spoken since October 7th. And then Benjamin Netanyahu was invited, but we're told since that invitation was extended that Benjamin Netanyahu is not now going to Sharm el-Sheikh, citing officially the start of a Jewish holiday and that it would not be appropriate during this time for him to go. Well, this is actually Donald Trump's motorcade coming. That was the Advanced Party motorcade we saw a few minutes earlier. This is now the 47th President of the United States, Donald Trump's motorcade, heading into the main airport in Jerusalem.
Now, as we watch these pictures, let's bring in the Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society, Alan Mendoza. Alan, we're just looking on our screens there, of course, at Benjamin Netanyahu, who I suppose this is sort of a farewell ceremony for him because he's not coming along, but Donald Trump perhaps even going to say some words on that red carpet where I believe I saw some microphones set up. Alan, this is such a moment imbued with meaning.
Yes, of course. I mean, this has been, the end of a momentous day in Israel, and it has been all the work of Donald Trump. He has, he's not been shy of taking the credit for it either, of course, but, he has achieved this amazing result that all the hostages are finally back. This whole conflict, which Israel was prosecuting largely to get those hostages back, as well as, of course, to destroy Hamas, the force that committed those atrocities originally, they've now got that very significant war gain. And, of course, Trump is responsible for it. So it is a great moment. And, of course, he's off to the next phase, as it were. And it's the appropriate place to say goodbye right now.
As you're looking at these pictures, that is actually Tel Aviv that they're going to be taking off from. Can I ask, because I wanted to talk about Tony Blair, because it seems that President Trump is not sure as to whether Tony Blair is now the right person to be serving on the board of peace. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's a shame in a sense, because Blair has shown over many years that he has got the relationships across the board in the Middle East, particularly with the Gulf states, but others as well. I mean, he's done work across the board in the Middle East, and as such, it's surprising that he isn't going to be regarded as some kind of useful interlocutor within this framework. I suppose, a lot will depend on who the president might want to replace him with. I'm assuming it's not going to be Peter Mandelson. So, we have to sort of, work out who would be better from the British perspective to be on that board. I mean, again, given his depth of experience in the region, this is something you would consider, Blair would have some, value to add to the debate.
Now, Alan, we can, of course, see the President of the United States there step out of the Beast, that armoured car that he takes with him wherever he goes in the world, and he's greeting their dignitaries and, of course, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, a hand on the shoulder there, a moment to say goodbye to Israel before he goes off and meets so many other leaders, including our Prime Minister, the French President, Arab leaders, and, of course, President Sisi of Egypt.
Quite an incredible achievement, really, for him. There are some with Trump derangement syndrome, we call it TDS here, who won't be prepared to acknowledge the work that he's done on this occasion. But I put it to anyone to try and take this away from him. He has brokered an incredible deal. There are those who aren't sure whether it will hold, but at least it is a start. His 20-point plan has been received well, and Hamas, he's managed even to get Hamas to kind of agree to elements of it. We are hearing that there is a bit of, there may be some trouble already in Gaza, but, hey, time will tell.
Well, I think this is one of the issues of Gaza. How governable is it as a polity, given that there are so many different tribes and factions, and the fighting isn't between Israelis and Hamas anymore. It's Hamas and different factional groups and tribes within the area for street control to some extent. And there have been people killed, not by Israel, but by Hamas and by some of these tribes. And I suppose, Alan Mendoza, this just shows, it illustrates the scale of the challenge ahead. All these world leaders attending this ceremony this afternoon, they'll be signing books, they'll be sort of patting themselves on the back. But my goodness me, this is the start of a long and hard road.
Oh, it is the start, not the end. I mean, we know how difficult this is going to be. And in a sense, this has been the easiest part because it's a definable part. You know who the hostages are. You know where they've got to go. I just want to point out one thing, though. You've got those pictures there. They're just out the picture right now. Note who's with Donald Trump. It is Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump, two people who've been, again, pivotal to this success, but who haven't been seen to be at the centre of the administration until this point. Is it they've actually been working behind the scenes for a long time and they're there? or is it that actually they are now back front and centre? And don't forget the sort of seminal triumph foreign policy-wise of the first Trump administration was the Abraham Accords brokered by Jared Kushner. Here he is again at the pivotal moment in the second Trump administration so far in terms of foreign policy successes. It's really interesting looking at that juxtaposition and the importance of Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump there.
Absolutely, but of course he was a named official in the first Trump administration. He had a role in the White House, and he has no such role, if I'm not mistaken, in this administration. I mean, does this mean he's been sort of having an unofficial role? Is there a quasi-official role? Will he be brought back in? All questions that will now surely be raised.
Exactly. For him to be, he's had no named role to this point. Of course, being part of the president's family, it is of course obvious that he has had some influence. But yes, could this be the return of Jared Kushner into front and centre of the administration? That'll be a very interesting thing to look out for, because all of this has his fingerprints on it. And if we are going to get some further action in Cairo and beyond in terms of the peace summit and the next phase that you were alluding to earlier, it's going to require very careful working by a number of people who've got the relationships. Now, Jared Kushner definitely has got the relationships again across the region to help make this next phase happen. Yes, there are challenges. How do you disarm Hamas? How do you stop Gaza from, descending into civil war? But look, we've got further than we would have thought we would have got with this administration, or indeed any administration, with the deal so far. What's to say they can't pull more rabbits out of the hat to actually deliver some kind of lasting cessation of violence? I'm not sure it'll be a peace in the warm sense, but a cessation of violence and the opportunity, at least, for Gazans to reconstruct.
I mean, it is strange, is it not, to have sort of the assumption that because someone is a family member of the President of the United States, they've sort of got a half role in the administration. I mean, this is the sort of thing that you might expect in perhaps less developed countries. We sort of have structures and rules in first world countries that sort of mean that if you're working for an administration, that's sort of publicly known about, so that people can know various business interests or conflicts of interest. I wonder if there'll be questions raised about this.
Well, there probably will be questions raised about it, but I'm sure the president will just shrug them off. As far as he's concerned, and frankly, as far as the world should be concerned, a successful deal has, been put on the table in terms of at least the starting point. We've ended, the hot war phase of this conflict, at least for now, but it's more than anyone else has done. Those hostages that he promised would come back, are back. I think it's, a significant triumph. And I think he's perfectly happy to shrug off those questions and go, look at the results. Doesn't matter how he got there. We've got the results that and we need to continue with that results basis, because that is the moment. I mean, he's alluded to this moment of being, the transformative moment for the entire Middle East. He's right. If it can be turned into a success, this will be the transformative moment. There's a lot of this to get there. But if Jared Kushner can help with that, are we seriously saying, because hitherto we weren't aware of his influence as such, we're going to say he shouldn't be involved? I think we should welcome it.
Well, Donald Trump has just gone up the steps now of which will now be called Air Force One, because it's going to be inside it. I'm learning so much. I'm sure he'll give that wave there. He is giving a little wave. He's done the fist pump that he does, and he seems to be addressing the crowd. I doubt when we'll be able to get any audio. A big wave to the crowd as he steps inside Air Force One.
And there it is, that moment is leaving Israel there on this historic day, heading towards Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt for the wider peace ceremony. He'll, of course, be meeting the Prime Minister of this country, Sir Keir Starmer, the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, the President of Egypt, President Sisi, as well as other Arab leaders as well. Alan, this will be a moment of symbolism, but will there be anything more than symbolism today with these meetings of leaders? Relationship building, of course. Will we get some substance too?
Well, I'd be surprised if we left with no further clue as to what will happen next in Gaza. I mean, that is the question everyone is asking right now. All right, phase one, successful, it seems so far, although, we know there are some problems potentially on the ground with some, violence between Palestinian factions. But, to move to phase two, yes, there's a symbolic ceremony today, of course, and everyone will be very happy about that. But it'll be a wasted opportunity, frankly, to have all those people in the room, including people, let's not forget, who have been spoken to about this for weeks, clearly, and have signed up to it without getting some further commitments. And if I was Donald Trump, I would be looking now at all the people people who have signed up to this deal and want to be part of its success to say, right, you want to claim that you're, the father of success here. Let's get your skin in the game. What are you going to be doing to assist with this process? How are we going to set up this board? What's a governing structure? Who's going to guarantee the peace on the ground? And of course, most crucially of all, who is going to ensure that Hamas is going to disarm and remove itself from the politics of Gaza and preferably from the territory itself in its entirety?
I think it'd be quite an interesting meeting with Donald Trump and Kstarmer, especially what's going on in this country with regard to the whole Chinese spy situation. Do you think that Donald Trump will have much respect really for Kstarmer at this stage, seeing as there does feel that there is? I mean, Kstarmer must be quite, in a sense, pleased this is overshadowing what is going on back home.
Well, yes, it's a good day as it is for good news, as we say, for good global news, because it does shift off, the statement, etc., that we're expecting shortly in Parliament, and indeed the lots of questions that he is going to have to answer. I thought it was also very interesting that Steve Witkoff mentioned Jonathan Powell by name in a tweet today, suggesting he had some significant role to play, a role we're not sure of course, but one that allegedly has helped produce this result. So yes, I'm sure he'll be the Prime Minister will be very happy to be in Sharm el-Sheikh, far away from questions about China, and I wonder if he will, again attempt to push some British commitment to the fore, again to show that he's doing something proactive, and again to change the news cycle, perhaps, and maybe a big gesture from the Prime Minister will again look at moving tomorrow's headlines.
Of course, that is what this Prime Minister seems to want to do quite often, shift the news agenda. He enjoys his foreign trips, perhaps more than any other Prime Minister.
It happens a lot, doesn't it? So there's something where there's a lot of pressure, then something happens abroad, because this has been a very, very busy news year so far, and somehow people forget about what's going on. But I don't think this particular incident, he's going to get out of this one.
But it's interesting that when a Prime Minister is in trouble, he tends to turn abroad, doesn't he? But Boris Johnson kept popping up in Ukraine whenever there was a sort of Partygate issue for him. And this Prime Minister has very much enjoyed going around the world. He's been to Sharm el-Sheikh before. He's been to, of course, India last week. And I think the number of trips this Prime Minister has taken has been pretty extraordinary. Just, Alan, before we let you go, I suppose a word on what the Prime Minister will be thinking about, will be doing, and perhaps will be wondering about his domestic situation.
Well, your point is very well made. It's normally second-term prime ministers who discover the joys of foreign travel. Once they've achieved their domestic agenda, or large parts of it, and are then moving on. This prime minister has discovered it early because his domestic agenda has, of course, been derailed so many times. So for him, it is indeed, as you say, a source of relief, because it means he can get out there and actually, if you like, not be encumbered by his own party or by, the hostile press as such. He's out there representing the country and, trying to make waves. Now, frequently those waves abroad, as we've seen with things like the Chagos Islands, are the wrong waves. They're heading in the wrong direction. But, he is still much more in control of that agenda than what he is, seemingly in control of at home. So I guess, we will see something coming out of today's summit from the UK perspective. I'll be amazed if he lets the opportunity go. I mean, Donald Trump should not let the opportunity go to get people engaged in his plan, and I'd be amazed if the Prime Minister let the opportunity go to make some grand statement that could well deflect attention from things at home back to things overseas. So let's see if how bold he's going to be and how much trouble he thinks he's in, because those two things may well lend themselves to an interesting statement later from the UK government.
So try and run out of this one, but in the famous words of Bob Marley, you're running away, but you can't run away from yourself. Thank you very much, Alan Ventosa from the Henry Jackson Society.
Well, Mark White joins us in the studio on that note. Any song lyrics for us, Mark? No, we won't put you on the spot. But of course, we're expecting Air Force One to take off any moment now, much delayed, to head to Sharm el-Sheikh for the Peace Summit.
Yeah, I mean, it's only an hour's flight, or just over an hour. But yeah, this is going to be an evening summit rather than a day-long summit. Those leaders will have had a few cups of coffee by now while they await Donald Trump's arrival there. Some other pieces of news that we can impart that have been developing while we've been watching the events in Jerusalem with the speech of Donald Trump and now his departure. We can confirm that Hamas have said that of the 28 hostage bodies that were to be returned today, only 4 are being returned today, which has been greeted with a great deal of dismay and not a little anger from families of the Israeli hostages today as well. It had been hoped that in short order, after all 20 hostages who are still alive had been returned to Israel, that the remains of those who sadly died would be repatriated as well. Now, Hamas did say that it would be very difficult in some circumstances to repatriate the remains of hostages because they are hostages who died deep in the tunnel systems and maybe under tons of rubble. But the news that only 4 of those hostage bodies are going to be returned today is a big disappointment to those families who desperately want their loved ones' remains returned. So we'll have to watch this over the coming hours and days to see how many of the remaining hostages are returned in terms of the remains. Clearly, it's a key part of the deal that was struck here. It's very important to Israel to have the remains of these Israeli citizens returned as well.
Though, of course, for Hamas to meet that agreement, considering the situation. But they did agree to it, didn't they?
They did, as we see Air Force One now taxiing with a view to taking off towards Sharm el-Sheikh. Sharm el-Sheikh about less than 500 miles away from Tel Aviv. Currently, this is Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv, where Air Force One is about to take off from a very secure airport for obvious reasons.
How long's the flight?
Just over an hour. Maybe Air Force One can put its foot on the gas.
Supersonic.
Well, it can go pretty fast, I have to say.
Faster than a commercial
It's a souped-up 747 in many respects. But look, I don't think they'll be putting the foot down. They'll just arrive when they arrive, and they'll do what they have to do. And a lot of the summit that's taking place isn't about the actual peace deal, but really about what they do in terms of trying to help in the reconstruction of Gaza.
And of course, the British government is putting tens of millions of pounds towards that. But perhaps, given what Donald Trump said in his speech to the Knesset, it will be the Arab states, those wealthy Arab states that, of course, have built glittering citadels of their own over the course of the last 20 years off the back of all of that luscious oil money. Perhaps those will be the countries that provide the most money towards the reconstruction of Gaza.
Well, it's about time they got involved.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and that's going back to your earlier point about the role that Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump have had here. That's been important right from the first administration, where they were developing relationships with these Gulf states, with the Arab neighbours of Israel, and many people then really quite critical of that process. But actually, maybe it's paying dividends. It certainly seems to have paid off big style in terms of those neighbours of Israel now being very invested in this peace plan. And if they can be persuaded not just to provide lots of money for Gaza, because that has been there in the past, but of course that money was used in very destructive and nefarious ways by the government of Gaza, Hamas, to prepare prepare itself for this war with Israel. So whatever is in place next needs to be an administration that is much more positive and constructive in the way forward, that's looking actually to reconstruct and rebuild this enclave and not use that money to rearm for another war further down the road with Israel.
Because, of course, that's what, before Gaza, I mean, the United Kingdom pumped in millions into Gaza. I think it was about
which was used to provide tunnels. Hundreds of miles of tunnels underneath the Gaza Strip, to provide rockets and other missiles. Absolutely just a destructive way of taking the world's goodwill towards Gaza and investing that.
Now, Mark, we're looking, of course, at Air Force One taking off there from Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv. It's worth noting just how many world leaders are already in Sharm el-Sheikh, that this summit was supposed to begin hours ago. We've seen the arrival of Chancellor Merz of Germany, Prime Minister Meloni of Italy, Erdogan of Turkey, Keir Starmer of Britain, Mark Carney of Canada, Viktor Orban of Hungary, Emmanuel Macron of France. I mean, everyone that you could possibly think of. The Emir of Qatar, the leader of Indonesia, just so many people from around the world are sitting, waiting for the President of the United States to arrive so that this ceremony can get underway.
And that's what I mean when we were talking about, the tremendous goodwill that there seems to be now in that region to get this peace process finally, after clearly 2 years of war and many years before that of inertia in that region, to get things moving, to try to build on what has been achieved today. And as I say, crucial to that are Israel's neighbours. If they truly are sincere about trying to ensure that an administration is put in place that doesn't allow the terrorists such as Hamas to get back in there, to have a foothold, to actually make a difference, then I think it could certainly be something that's to be a much more constructive and positive way forward.
All right, Mark White, thank you very much. Stay with us, though, because joining us now is Efrat Machikawa, the niece of the hostage Gadi Moses, who was released by Hamas in February of this year. Efrat, welcome to the programme. How are you feeling? Because, of course, you've been through this already earlier this year when Gadi was released. How are you feeling today?
Let's just establish.
Really very happy and joyful for all the families for the reunion like we had. But on the other hand, there's so many deceased that we're not sure when are they coming back and how this is going to be operated. So we're very, very worried. But this is the story, the sad story of what happened after the atrocity of October 7th. After we were attacked so brutally, we have to move from gratefulness and joy and happiness to agony and sadness. It is all a very, very complex situation, I must say.
Looking here at pictures of some of those returns, they're just weeping with joy and happiness, I suppose.
Yeah.
But so much so that it's such mixed emotions, isn't it? It's happiness that people have been released, but of course, deep sadness that this all had to happen in the first place. We're looking at your uncle, of course, on screen now. Just talk us through that. It must have been such mixed emotions.
You know, when I was running to him, I become this little girl that always runs to her big, strong uncle. For a second, I forgot about the situation. And Gadi, being Gadi, knowing that I was really worried about him, all he whispered was, "I'm okay, I'm normal." That is to say that our greatest fear was not the physical challenges, but the mental, because they went through terrible times, humiliation, starvation. They didn't get freedom to go to the toilet when they wanted. And the worst of all, Gadi was kept alone, and he was kept, though a human being is a social creature, he was kept totally isolated, and that was really very difficult for him, actually. And we were afraid, and I'm sure, with such trauma, you can never really understand what you have to expect, what's coming up. And truly, it's not as if a hostage was held in tunnels and now he's back. He will see a doctor and tomorrow he will be fine. The trauma is still here. We're not even in the phase of a post-trauma. And thinking about healing, that will take a very, very long time. Surely for those that were there, tortured for 738 days. Can you imagine the number of days? It's endless.
How is Gadi getting on now, though? Has he managed to integrate, and how difficult has it been?
That is quite amazing. His resilience is outstanding, and he has decided that although he lost a lot, including his partner that was murdered, including 95% of the houses of his community, he will go back and he will rebuild. And so he did. On Saturday, he moved back to his renovated house. His house wasn't burnt, and he is rebuilding, and he is back to teaching the younger generation agriculture. He is fighting for the release of all hostages. Now we have to fight for the release of all the deceased. And he is quite incredible. He is inspiration to us, the family, the community, the state, and I believe to whoever in the wild world that is asking and finding out about him. He is quite wonderful.
Efrat, that is the most remarkable tale of resilience there, to return to the community where so many family members, neighbours, loved ones were taken, not just taken hostage, but their lives were taken too. The burnt-out community, to rebuild that there. I mean, that is such strength of character.
Yes.
To return to the area where it all happened and rebuild from scratch.
Imagine you with 400 people around you. That's the size of the community of Kibbutz Nir Oz. And one of four of them was either brutally murdered or violently taken as hostage. Some of the people that were taken hostage were already dead bodies that were killed in a battle. Very brave people who were trying to protect their families, but some were taken alive. And imagine they were alive. They somehow survived the ordeal to get into the tunnels, but they were executed. So Gadi's friends, all of them, were executed. He is the only elderly man that went out of the hell that is in Gaza. And that is incredible. His resilience is something we all need to study from.
Now, Benjamin Netanyahu has received a lot of criticism from a lot of people inside Israel. What is your view of him?
In this day, I really do prefer to look at President Trump, actually. I think he did a wonderful thing. I think that he managed to understand this is the time to end this war. This is the time to save the living hostages. And this is the time to save the entire region. And for that, I'm grateful. In such a day, I am really looking forward and less backwards. And I really do hope that the seeds of hope and the seeds of change are being planted today, because we must make sure that Israel will stay secured, Israel will stay thriving, but at the same time, we need to think of our region. So it was very smart move to get the coalition, the diverse coalition of different Arab countries, moderate countries from around the region, together with other leaders of the world. And you know, I'm just next to the square. I can hear the announcer saying that Matan Tsangauka, Einav's son, is now arriving to the hospital, and that is great news as well. So I move from my sorrow and my mourning again to the smile that is a very, very special smile kept only for such a unique day.
This is remarkable to hear that you're right by. We're, of course, looking at pictures of Hostages Square on the left of our screen now. Give us a sense of the environment there, because, of course, it's been a scene of such sorrow for so long, but there's been such celebration today.
Yes, but, you know, the celebration are a sense, in my point of view, a sense of a relief of people just couldn't take it anymore. And there were at times more than 100,000 people coming and hugging each other, even people you don't know. Israel is such a warm society, you know, and everyone is today as if friends of everyone that are standing around him. And it was such a relief, the end of the war and the return of the hostages is something that Israel was longing for. We are a wounded society and we need the time to heal. And hopefully after healing, we will be able to look further and to really seek some growth around our neighborhood as well.
Okay, Efrat, thank you very much. That's Efrat Machikawa. She's the niece of the hostage Gadi Moses, who was released by Hamas in February of this year. Thank you very much.
Just such a remarkable story to hear. The bravery of some of these hostages who've been kept in such unimaginable conditions, and then not to sort of go and retreat and sort of, I could see the sort of incentives for any hostage release to sort of not want to confront what had happened, but to hear that Gadi Moses, a man who was taken from his home, as 1 in 4 of his neighbours were massacred or stolen from their homes, as his entire community was burnt to the ground, that he would return there to the site of that he would rebuild there. I mean, what a remarkable human being.
Well, of course, he lost his partner there, and there are those survivors who did survive but also lost their partners. There's the story of one gentleman, Roya Shalev, 30. He was wounded by Hamas terrorists at the festival a few years ago. His girlfriend was killed, and very, very sadly, he recently took his own life because he couldn't live with what he had been through. And there are, you know, these are some of the stories that have come out, how this particular awful day affected so many, even having survived being a hostage, to then come and take your own life because you can't live with what's happened.
On the second anniversary of October the 7th, to the day, it's clear why that went on, and my goodness me, there must have been so many. There are so many. I mean, in many ways, he's another victim of October the 7th. We say 1,200, 1,300. Perhaps it should be 1,301.
Well, there are so many victims, and there may even be some who were never found or something else happened, and we will never know. But
well, we should say that on the right of our screens here, we're looking at the medical centre there in Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv, where hostages are being taken. We're looking at that medical centre where those hostages are being treated.
All right, well, joining us now, we have Mark White, but earlier Sir Keir Starmer met with the Emir of Qatar in Egypt to mark the truly historic day of peace. And here's one of the things he had to say, which we'll play it very shortly, but Mark White, it was so tragic to hear the hostages who actually made it out alive. One gentleman took his own life, and the fact they're now having to try and reintegrate into society must be extremely hard.
And of course we have hostages who have not made it out alive. To that end, confirmation from Hamas that 4 bodies, the remains of 4 hostages, will be repatriated today. They are the remains of Guy Iluz, Yossi Sharabi, Bevan Joshi and Daniel Perez. They'll be handed over today without specifying a time. Hamas was expected to release a considerable number of hostages today, but for whatever reason we know that actually locating the remains of some of the hostages has not been easy because they've been buried under tons of rubble in the tunnel systems themselves. So that is maybe one of the reasons why we're not seeing more than 4 hostage bodies released today. But there you see one of the Israeli Defense Forces helicopters landing. I know that the Sheba Medical Center in Tel Aviv is one of the locations where the hostages are being taken to. And they're taken there for medical assessment, of course, in the interim, because they've had 738 days in captivity, being kept in the most shocking of conditions, being subject to physical as well as mental trauma, and it will take people a long time to recover. Some, as we've been alluding to, will never recover from this ordeal. So the first order of events is, of course, to give them that initial assessment as they were handed over to the Red Cross initially, then the IDF, then flown to a hospital for a more intensive sort of assessment of their conditions and their needs, but at the same time realizing that it is very important for these people, for their mental health and for their loved ones, to get them reunited as soon as possible. So it will be within the hospitals here in Tel Aviv and the greater Tel Aviv area that those hostage families will finally be able to see their loved ones again. Some of them were given a sort of an early chance to not reunite in person but over the phone earlier today, where Hamas did agree to make some video calls on behalf of some of the hostages that were being released. So families got a chance to chat to them, to see that that process of releasing these hostages was underway. But I mean, what a mighty relief now, seeing those military helicopters touching down in Tel Aviv with those freed hostages.
Now we're looking at Sharm el-Sheikh. We can see Chancellor Merz of Germany stood up there. Is that Emmanuel Macron in the background? You can see Giorgia Meloni sitting down there. Erdogan of Turkey there as well. Keir Starmer sat next to Emmanuel Macron. These are pictures from Sharm el-Sheikh, where world leaders from the Arab region, but actually much further afield as well, have gathered. They're all waiting, of course, for Donald Trump, who's going to be a few hours late after his speech to the Knesset went on longer than people were expecting, and indeed started later than people were expecting. But what a room of power here.
I know. I mean, I was sort of expecting to see Tony Blair there, but he's not, is he? He's not sort of been approved yet. Look, I think it's quite an achievement to get all these people together talking about peace in the Middle East. And I have to say that it's interesting, when I asked about Benjamin Netanyahu, there seems to be still some sort of feeling that many aren't happy with the way he's operated things. However, it has resulted in this gathering alongside his work with Donald Trump, and I'm wondering what they'll be discussing this afternoon. Obviously the 20-point peace plan, but I suspect they'll be determining what exactly to do next and how to go about it.
Yeah, I mean, they have been thrust into the meeting, this peace summit, in very short order. Egypt had just a few days to scramble this together. So much of the agenda is completely unexplored. There's a 20-point peace plan, but actually achieving it step by step is going to be enormously difficult. I don't think you can overplay how terribly difficult it's going to be in the months and years ahead, potentially. And they've just got to absorb it. They've got to... I think the fact that there is so much goodwill and unanimity, it seems, from the region. I don't think Iran's there, but you heard from Donald Trump in his speech to the Knesset, the hand of friendship is extended to Iran as well if Iran wants to play a more constructive constructive role, because remember, Iran was, the exact opposite of that, in that Hamas is a proxy of Iran, receiving a good deal of funding from Iran to prosecute the wars, the unrest that we've seen in that from that enclave over recent years. So Donald Trump, as I say, extending that hand to Iran to say, look, now is your chance to play that more constructive role there. Let's see what the Iranians do. I think they've not been as vocal as sometimes they have been in the past, so that at least might be a welcome sign.
Well, that really would be an achievement if Iran came to the table and became part of the peace process. So I'm sure a lot of people in Iran, the Iranian people themselves, would like to see that happen.
I think even if not playing a direct part, just backing off, not being, being the aggressor, being that malign influence, just sort of backing off a bit.
I think highly unlikely they're going to join the Abraham Accords anytime soon. Strange things do happen.
People didn't think Donald Trump would be able to do this. He's done it, so...
Well, shall we just take a second to remind ourselves what's been going on while we've been listening to all of this happen in Israel? Of course, Sir Keir Starmer has been in Egypt. He met with the Emir of Qatar to mark this truly historic day of peace, and here's what he had to say.
We, the United Kingdom, stand ready to play our full part. In particular, we stand ready in relation to monitoring the ceasefire and decommissioning Hamas capability and weaponry. And that's drawing on our experience in Northern Ireland and the IRA, which we dealt with in particular in relation to decommissioning. So congratulations, thank you, and the United Kingdom stands ready to play its full part as we move forward from today. So thank you very much indeed. It's a real pleasure and privilege to be having this discussion with you.
I'm sure Keir Starmer is very pleased. He is now talking about something else rather than the whole Chinese spy situation, which I mean, it may bubble over and bubble underneath the surface, which would be very convenient for him. Obviously, he's pleased that the hostages are being released. I won't go into what he said before, because I think that's not appropriate at this moment, but this is a really handy distraction for him.
Well, there's no doubt that domestically things are getting very difficult indeed for Sir Keir Starmer's administration. Some real questions that still haven't been answered satisfactorily in terms of just how that trial of those accused of spying for China collapsed or was allowed to collapse, what role, if any, Sir Keir Starmer's administration played in that. It was really interesting to hear from Olivia Utley, who was at the Downing Street briefing before. The vast majority, about an hour of that briefing, it was just question after question on that trial in China and what role, if any, played. In particular, what role perhaps the Prime Minister's National Security Advisor, Jonathan Powell, played here. He is under an awful lot of pressure because the claims are that he, on behalf perhaps of the administration, interceded here in a way that it led to the collapse of this trial, completely refuted by the administration. But wasn't it so interesting this morning, out of the blue, to get a social media tweet, and I'm sounding incredulous because I am incredulous, that Steve Witkoff, the man who has so much on his plate at the moment, in dealing with this momentous event unfolding in the Middle East, takes time out to tweet about the special role that one Jonathan Powell played in helping secure this peace deal. I mean,
you do wonder what conversations...
My eyebrows are well and truly raised.
What conversations are we not party to that have been going on behind the scenes? We do know that Jonathan Powell is in the Middle East as we speak. He's been pictured sitting in a golden throne next to Keir Starmer in Sharm el-Sheikh. I mean, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that Steve Witkoff and Jonathan Powell actually saw each other face to face, that then resulted in this peculiar tweet, this endorsement from the American Special Envoy for peace towards the British National Security Advisor, the security advisor who is under such pressure for his dealings with China as things speak. I mean, to some extent, it does speak to our unique relationship with the United States.
I guess so, yes, but it's all the more peculiar because it flies in the face of what both the US ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, and the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, indicated was Britain's role in securing this peace
Which
deal.
was, remind us?
Well, Mike Huckabee actually accused Bridget Phillipson, who was saying that we played a key role behind the scenes, of being delusional.
Yeah.
So if that's the US ambassador to Israel saying that the British government and a minister is delusional, why on earth is Steve Witkoff now coming out on social media and tweeting that effectively Jonathan Powell played this key role? It does have a real smell about it, I'm afraid.
I don't think Donald Trump will let this go under the radar, though, because he's talking about, you know, he's concerned about our closeness to China. He's concerned about the supremacy. I don't know. I think Donald Trump might. He was talking about the special relationship, remember?
He was,
but
I think one of the strange things about Donald Trump is, yes, a lot of people around him will be very concerned about that. Marco Rubio has been on the record about that before. But Donald Trump has such a strange soft spot for Britain that whenever he's in the room with Keir Starmer, he wants to please Keir Starmer. He says nice things about Keir Starmer.
No, he's a businessman. He's somebody who does deals. He knows it's wise to keep...
But he agreed to the Chagos sell-off.
Well, that's because he doesn't lose anything. The United Kingdom does. It's not... You know, it's down to Keir Starmer to protect the British people's interests.
But there were people around Donald Trump who are raising the alarm bells about the Chagos deal, and Trump himself, well, he didn't mind that much.
Well, probably because America doesn't really lose out. It is the United Kingdom, ultimately. And what would it look like if he bothered to argue with Keir Starmer? Why should he be looking at Britain's interests like that? No, he's concerned about what America will get out of it. America get a good deal out of it. Britain, we're the ones that lose. Keir Starmer should do something about that, but doesn't seem to want to.
But then surely the same logic...
keep good relations.
Surely the same logic applies in other senses too. I mean, will Donald Trump be that concerned about what our national security advisor is getting up to when it comes to two Brits who were allegedly bought by China?
Well, I mean, I think he might be concerned not about Jonathan Powell, who will mean nothing to President Trump, but certainly the pressure that we're told they're friendly, his friend Sir Keir Starmer is under because of this. PMQs is going to be so interesting.
This is so true. We'd have weeks and weeks and weeks of recess where all of this has been bubbling along behind the scenes.
And this is the first real chance for Kemi Badenoch to get in there and really to ask some key questions. You're going to have a bumper audience on Wednesday.
I hope she asks the right questions. I hope she stays on this spy situation and questions Keir Starmer, because he needs some sort of opposition.
Well, amidst it all, of course, we are seeing this enormous summit for peace. We're looking at, on the right of our screens, Gaza, on the left of our screens, Tel Aviv, Hostages Square, and, of course, Donald Trump in the air currently, 30,000 feet, somewhere between Tel Aviv and Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. Let's discuss it all with the journalist Audrey McAlpine. Audrey, thanks indeed for joining us live there from Tel Aviv. Just give us a sense of the atmosphere where you are.
It's certainly a very festive atmosphere. Since last night, people have been filling into this square here behind me, Hostage Square. Earlier today, there were tens of thousands of people here. You can see there is that countdown over in the corner that's been marking 737 days. It's still going because there are still the bodies of some of these hostages in Gaza. So that clock will continue to go. But we've been hearing musical acts on stage, just a very festive atmosphere, different bands singing, people celebrating. And actually, just a few moments ago, there was a helicopter that flew overhead. There's been helicopters all day long flying just over here, over the top of Hostage Square. We were told that on one case, there were two hostages in the helicopter, and they asked the pilot to go around again so that they could see the crowd, so that they could greet the Israeli people after all of those nearly 2 years in Gaza.
Feel now not to be under threat of constant bombardment and, and not having to run to shelters constantly. Presumably that has changed literally overnight.
It has. There's a feeling, I guess, a cautious optimism amongst Israelis that I've spoken with who said they're just beginning to feel, I guess, a glimmer of hope that this could be a lasting peace. And in the buildings around the square, you can see damage. You can see boarded up windows, for example, over there from where earlier there were these Iranian missile strikes that we remember that happened over the summer. So there is still that memory of various wars that have plagued Israel. But in the case of Gaza, there is, like I said, this cautious optimism that they can take for once the first sigh of relief. For many people, this terror attack has really lasted since October the 7th. Every day they've had to relive it. And now they can finally take that sigh of relief, knowing that these hostages are now home.
Mixed emotions, relief, yes, celebration, yes, musical acts, as you've been describing. But of course, there's been such loss that Israel has suffered. There are, of course, those hostage bodies that you're talking about, people who've been killed by Hamas, either in captivity or even people who were killed on October the 7th and their bodies gruesomely dragged in to Gaza. I mean, that must hang heavy over all of this.
Certainly, and that was something interesting about today, is that while people were very elated and they were celebrating, also at certain moments on this screen here behind me, for example, you can see the faces of hostages, and they would show these initial images of the hostages reuniting with their family, and people had tears running down their faces. They were hugging one another. So it was certainly a roller coaster of emotions, both joy that they're returning home, but also, the tragedy of what these guys have had to face. Many of them, of course, we've seen that they are in good health, but of course, how they can begin to rebuild their lives has yet to be seen.
Now, I've spoken to a couple of people in Israel and asked about their feelings on Benjamin Netanyahu, and some didn't want to comment, but they were grateful for Donald Trump. What is the sort of general consensus view of Benjamin Netanyahu? Are people thankful for the work he's done, or is there a cloud over him?
It's an interesting question. Just today, for example, the MC up on this stage, when Netanyahu spoke to the Israeli parliament, they did not broadcast it on the stage because they were worried about perhaps the crowd booing him. In fact, and then when Trump did mention Netanyahu in his speech, the MC came over the microphone and asked people to just respect Trump. The whole thing here was about respecting Donald Trump and giving thanks to him. Because, of course, like you mentioned, there are mixed feelings about Netanyahu here in Israel. And I saw that also here on Saturday when we were visited by Steve Witkoff, the U.S. Special Envoy, and who was flanked by Jared Kushner and his wife, Ivanka Trump. And people were saying, Witkoff, Witkoff. They were chanting. They were also cheering, thank you, Trump. But when Netanyahu was mentioned, people did boo his name.
Wow.
Wow.
Well, Audrey, really good to talk to you. Thank you so much. That's Audrey McAlpine. She's there in Hostage Square in Tel Aviv.
So interesting to see around what it's like there, the atmosphere.
Actually on the ground.
Absolutely. Let's go now, though, to some footage that was taken a little bit earlier in the day. This is one of those hostages who has been freed, returning to Tel Aviv. Let's take a look.
There are a gentleman in a white T-shirt, I'm presuming he's a hostage, with his hands over his head, and then he's placed them in front of his mouth there in sort of fists. He's waving now. He looks relatively healthy, he's basically...
Thin but alive.
But thankfully alive. He's done the heart sign with his hands.
And he's sitting in a van which is being driven, I believe, through Hostage Square there. So straight from Gaza, he's seeing so many people cheering and whooping, putting his hands to his head. He can scarcely believe it after 2 years of hell that he's been released, that he's free. But of course, he must go to the hospital. He must have his medical checks. But what a moment, Mark White.
I think it's obvious that freed hostage asked for that. They would not have subjected him, to suddenly all these thousands of people unless, as they were driving driving through, he said, look, you know, open, let me, you know, see them and wave to them, because you've got to have the care of someone like that uppermost in your mind. And, you know, having been kept maybe in solitude, we don't know, but under very difficult circumstances for 2 years. They wouldn't have wanted to do that unless that young man was determined that he wanted to celebrate with the crowd and wave and show his appreciation. It was very heartwarming to see that, but you're right, I mean, very skinny.
Well, he was, wasn't he? But Audrey did say that actually there was a helicopter bringing the hostages and they actually wanted to go around again to see the square.
Yes.
So, you know, again, must be such an emotional moment to believe that you've actually survived this awful ordeal. So many people have died whilst during it, but you're one of the supposedly lucky ones.
No, just a real sense of emotion there. So many different emotions, right? There's joy, there's music, there's laughter, there's life, but there's also that sense in the air that, my goodness me, wouldn't the world be better if they didn't have to come here, if they didn't have to gather?
And all these different emotions will probably be felt by individuals at different times, because there are times where you can imagine they will be elated by what they've gone through, other times when they'll be deeply angry, because, I mean, who knows what they've seen, what they've endured, how cruel their captors may have been to them. I mean, it doesn't even bear thinking about, but, you know, they've borne it, they've survived for 738 days, and here they are now released on this momentous day in Israel.
What an incredible day it's been as well. Well, listen, that's it from us. But next up, it's time for Martin Daubney.
Yeah, so let's hand over the baton now. Martin, you've got most of the Peace Summit to come. Of course, it's coming later than we expected, but over to you.
Thank you very much, Tom and Nana and Mark White there, excellently keeping this story through to us throughout the past few hours. Been riveted to it myself. What a momentous day in world peace. You're with me, Martin Daubney, now through until 6 p.m. Just to bring it to speed of where we are at present, Donald J. Trump, of course, the President of the United States, is midair in Air Force One on his way to Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt.